associates from the government, the private sector, civil society, colleagues from the World Bank, and friends. We hope you and your family are as well as you can be in coping in these challenging pandemic days. A warm welcome to you all for season 1 of our webinar series on reimagining reuse of treated wastewater. I am Kavita Sachwani and I lead the Maharashtra program of the 2030 Water Resources Group. As many of you would be aware, 2030 WRG is part of the World Bank's Water Global Practice and is a public-private civil society platform working in 11 countries, including India, in the sustainable management of water resources through our multi-stakeholder platforms. Our leadership areas are transforming value chains, building resilience, and a circular water economy. One of our thematic areas of focus in Maharashtra is wastewater reuse and management. And we are convening this webinar series as a part of our efforts to build more awareness around the need to mainstream reuse of treated wastewater, understand its many dimensions and applications, and the critical role that multi-stakeholder platforms play to make it happen. According to a report by the Central Pollution Control Board, by 2050, India will require close to 1,500 cubic kilometers of water, of which 74% is identified for irrigation, 7% for drinking water, 4% for industrial use, 9% for energy, and 6% for others. Today, water is mostly managed in a linear fashion, but as demand grows, we have to move from a linear model of water use in which water becomes more polluted and wasted as it travels through the system to a circular one where we treat, reuse, and recycle wastewater. In India, only 30 to 40% of wastewater is treated and a lesser percentage is reused. The irony of wastewater is that it is already in the location where fresh water is needed. It is time that the linear use of our most precious resource gave way to a sustainable continuum. There are several domestic and global examples of use of treated wastewater. For example, in Singapore, treatment of urban wastewater is close to 100%. Reuse is close to 40%. Israel, again, is a shining example of both treatment of wastewater and reuse of treated wastewater, where percentages are close to 90% and 85% respectively. In India as well, the subject is not new, and many states, including Gujarat, Karnataka, Telangana, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Punjab, have a policy for treated wastewater reuse for various applications. Government of Maharashtra also has a policy that makes municipalities responsible for recycling wastewater and reusing treated wastewater for thermal power plant cooling, industrial use, and for other non-potable purposes, and is working on an extension focused specifically for agriculture applications. But it would not be incorrect to say that the subject does not have as high a priority within ULBs and rural local bodies because of various competing priorities in their day-to-day administration. However, if we were to give it a special status and collectively reimagine different elements of it and drive outcomes through a multi-stakeholder approach, we can help not just mainstream wastewater reuse and management, but also make it ROI attractive to bring private capital into the sector. We are very happy to co-convene our first webinar of this 3-part series with our multi-stakeholder partners, the Israel Trade Mission, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Indo-EU Water Partnership with GIZ, and the Government of Maharashtra. Collectively, we have put together for you a mix of an eminent panel of policymakers, practitioners, and academicians who will share their views and insights with us on how we can institutionalize and enable an ecosystem of treatment and wastewater reuse in the context of agriculture specifically for this session. We will have some interesting discussions on the challenges in wastewater recycling and reuse for agriculture applications, positive and negative impacts of wastewater reuse in agriculture, including which crops are the best suited for wastewater irrigation, dangers of uncontrolled and untreated wastewater irrigation in terms of public health and pollution, and also benefits of using treated wastewater for irrigation. We will start our plenary with insights from Israel, which has excelled in this important dimension of circularity, and what and how this can be replicated in the Indian context. Then hear about some insights from a report that WBCSD has recently launched called Wastewater Zero, followed by an overview of the draft National Wastewater Reuse Policy by the Indo-EU Water Partnership and the GIZ team. Panel 1 will focus on subnational and regional perspectives on some interesting work that many Indian states are doing. Panel 2 is a showcase of some encouraging baby steps taken in Marathwada region in Maharashtra. And so without much ado, let's dive straight into the session and hear it from the experts who have joined us today. Once again, a warm and sincere thank you to all the speakers and panelists who've agreed to participate in this webinar today, and to everyone in the audience. A couple of housekeeping rules. I think we're all familiar with these, but nevertheless, please continue to keep your mics on mute and your videos off when not speaking to save bandwidth. We have budgeted limited time for audience Q&A and would encourage you to post your questions and the name of the panelist you are posing them to into the chat box, which our panelists can answer on a best effort basis. We will have one or two questions which we will read out at the end of the plenary and both the panel discussions, and we will connect offline for any unanswered questions. I have the very proud privilege of introducing our partners and panelists for today's session. I now invite Sagi Icher. Sagi is the Commercial Attaché, Head of Economic and Trade Mission at the Israel Trade Mission in Mumbai. Sagi, with the team in Mumbai, support the Israeli trade and export into the western region of India, including Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Goa, attracting and encouraging foreign investments in Israel and creating strategic cooperation between Israeli and Indian companies. In his role, Sagi works closely with Israel companies and Indian decision makers to bring Israel innovations and technologies, including those in water management and agriculture, to support Indian markets. Sagi and the entire team from the Israel Trade Mission, thank you for co-conceiving and co-convening this session with us. Over to you, Sagi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let us begin by saying thank you for all the great team of WRG, Kavita, Anjali, Magna. Thank you for bringing this event to life and promoting it, aside on social media, finalizing. We did our part for sure, yes, but without WRG Maharashtra, I don't think this event would all be here at the same time. So thank you very much, Kavita. Namaste. Namaste, G, to all of you. Hope everybody had a happy Dushra the last 2 days. I've been seeing firecrackers and other things out of my windows for the last few days. I wasn't sure what it is. Everybody said it's part of the holiday, so hope everybody's enjoying it. As Kavita mentioned, I am heading the Israeli Trade and Economic Mission here in Mumbai. We're part of the Israeli government, part of the Israeli economy and industry. We are working all around the world, literally spread all around the globe. In India, we have 3 different missions, one here based in Mumbai, one in our embassy in Delhi, and the third is down south in Bangalore. All our missions all over the world, and especially here in India, what we're trying to do on a daily basis is to allow to increase the bilateral trade, and mainly to allow Indians to invest in Israel and Israelis to bring their tech into India, to help the Indian people, the Indian businesses, the Indian market, and the big population of India, the Indian public, to gain from Israeli innovation, Israeli tech, Israeli developments. And this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. On top of that, Israel as a government, as a state, joined about 2 weeks ago the WRG 2030 as a part of the governing council.
Cisco Webex meeting kara, Cisco.
Somebody needs to mute himself. I can hear somebody over talking. Israel joined the WRG 2030 about 2 years ago, part of the governing council, governing committee.
Sorry, Sagi. May I request the rest of the team to keep their mics on mute, please?
Thank you, Kavita. So on the one hand, we're trying to bring Israeli technology to India, to Maharashtra, to promote the water treatment, the water usage, water distribution, everything all over the water chain, okay? From the way you build a reservoir to collect rainfall, how you distribute those water that you collected in a dam or in a reservoir to the people, to the villages, to the small towns of Maharashtra. After it was consumed or used by farmers, by industry, by private people in our houses, what to do with that water, how you treat it, okay, how you distribute that, how you take all the treated water, can you use it again, can you not reuse it again, and if this water needs to go back to the river, be dropped to the sea, how pure does it need to be, how clear does it need to be? So through all of that chain, from getting the water until this water going back into the ocean, back to nature, back to the river, Israeli companies, Israeli know-how, Israeli innovation, and mainly Israeli policy making, Israeli water management systems are there for the entire chain. I don't think I need to say to anybody which is audience at this event, India is facing some various challenges water. It's very unique in India. It's very complex. But I'm very confident when I'm saying Israel can provide solutions to almost any challenge India or the government of Maharashtra or people of Maharashtra will present to Israeli companies, to the Israeli innovative tech and startups. As I mentioned, we're part of WRG, so this combination should be made easier to the great WRG team operating already in Maharashtra, in the Israeli companies, the Israeli tech here to the country. These days, everything will be virtual, of course, but hopefully in some time, companies can actually physically come here, experience the challenges firsthand, offer their solutions, and from then on, we need to be processed forward by the public sector with the private sector in order to finalize everything and make everything doable. I just want to mention one thing very, very briefly before I hand over the microphone to Mr. Oder Distel. Everybody here is again about water and water treatment and water facilities. So I'm very happy to announce that on the 10th and 11th of November, roughly 3 weeks from today, we will be having the Israeli Digital Water event. It's all virtual, all online. 21 Israeli innovative companies in water. Again, everything I mentioned earlier, water treatment, water distribution, leaking detection, whatever you can think about. Okay, and the water world, everything I do with the water, managing your water systems in a city, in a state. 21 top-notch, great, amazing Israeli tech companies will be presenting there. You can have B2B sessions with them. You can listen to panelists. Oder Distel is one of them, by the way. He's going to host a panel over there. I guess we'll mention it. Experts from Israel, experts from around the world, sharing their knowledge, sharing what they experience on how to make water and water usage more efficient, more economically speaking, how to reduce price, how to increase quality when this water is leaving you from your usage, how to make it more environmental friendly. Everything is going to be in that event, 10 and 11 of November. It's 100%, I mean, well, it's not 100%. For our guests, it can be free, okay, 100% free for our guests. So please feel free to reach out to us, the Israeli consulate in Mumbai. You have our details here. Mr. Lenny Wator probably reach out to some of you and invited you to the event. All free, covered by us for you if you come to us. I know that the people from WRG, Kavita and her team is going to be there. So that is it. We're very, very proud to be part of this event. We're looking forward to this entire event series, this and the 2 other events to come, in order to understand where and how Israeli and Israeli companies through us, through the Israeli government, can facilitate all these solutions that Maharashtra needs, and to help you as Indians, as the Republic of India, sort out some, but not all of your water challenges. Thank you very much, Kavita.
Thank you, Sagi. I think most of us know that Israel is a glowing example of reuse of treated wastewater. With 500 million cubic meters of wastewater getting treated every year, Israel has set a benchmark globally in wastewater treatment and reuse. Oded Distel will share with us his perspectives on the economic advantage of utilizing the treated wastewater in agriculture, on whether reuse has impacted quality of crops and any challenges while meeting international food quality standards. Oded is recognized both in Israel and internationally as the leading expert on Israel's water and energy industries. He is currently the CEO of Talia Agricultural Solutions since September 2019, prior to which he was the founder and director of Israel Newtech from November 1995 to May 2019. Israel Newtech is Israel's world-renowned pioneering national energy and water program at the Ministry of Economy and Industry, which spearheaded Israel's water and energy ecosystem through a multi-stakeholder approach since its founding in 2007. Israel Newtech is recognized as a successful case study of an innovative and effective way governments can be involved in supporting the clean tech sector of a country. Prior to his current position, Oded was the director of the Investment Promotional Center, Invest in Israel, for foreign investments in Israel. And prior to that, he was at the Israeli commercial attaché in Greece, where he formed and implemented Israel's foreign business policy, as well as assisted Israeli companies in developing their business in the Greek market. Thank you, Oded, and I look forward to your comments and your presentation.
Thank you, Kavita. A great pleasure being here with you today. The only downside is that because we are online, so I miss a wonderful opportunity to visit India again, which was something that I took with both hands whenever I had the opportunity to visit your wonderful country.
Sure.
Hopefully, we'll be able to do that again soon, and for you to visit Israel and for us to visit India. I work quite a lot in India also in my new capacity, but this is for another session.
Sure.
So, with your permission, Kavita, I'll start with my presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anjali mentioned to me you'd like to show your slides yourself. Is that okay? Would you like any help from our side, or would you share your screen, Oded?
So I thought that you'll put it on, and I will.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Yeah, put it on as regular, and we'll work it out like.
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. Great. So the idea of this session and the fact that it is done under the umbrella of the WRG with the Israeli consulate and other partners makes it very interesting for me, because the vision and the concept of the WRG is about multi-stakeholders approach and about bridging between the different sectors, which for me is a crucial element and basically the key. And you know, as we've been told, it's important to say the important message from the beginning. And I would like to stress that for me, the key is about the ability to adapt cultural changes and about mind shift. And let me explain why. Basically, we have this notion or this tendency of people, of human beings, that when we perceive a situation as a necessity, then we are very open and we are willing to go out of the ordinary, and we are willing to innovate. And it is described as necessity is the mother of innovation. Okay, I think everybody can agree with it. The thing is that there is another side to the same coin. And this situation can be described with a sentence: if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And basically what it means is that we like to stick, we as human beings, I'm saying now, I characterize all of us in in the same place. It is us individual, it is societies, companies, governments. People like to continue and to stick to business as usual scenario. And we don't like so many changes. And the thing is that are we able to understand the situation before it is broken and make the necessary changes that we need to do? So what I'm going to describe in my presentation is to tell you a little bit about what is going on in Israel, and I will try to touch also, I would say, the soft elements behind the changes, which mean the cultural changes that can be very instrumental in order to push the reforms forward. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is a little bit complicated slide, but the important element in it is to look at the trend. And what you can see here, the dot represents the water consumption if Israel was to stick to business as usual scenario. And you can see that the dot goes up and up and up, because population growth in Israel is quite high. Standard of living was again growing quite high from the time that the country was established. And those quantities of water that we would have needed in order to support those the growth, those are imaginary quantities that you cannot imagine, that do not exist in our region. But since Israel is a relatively young country, and since water was perceived as a national priority from the moment the country was established, and in a way even much before, things were decided on a national level. And this is a very unique example of a water structure sector that was very carefully planned along the years. If we look at many other, or almost all other places around the world, water was always, is always a sectorial issue or geographical issue, meaning the village or the farm would take care of their own water needs, the small factory, the little city, and not much of integration in between the different stakeholders. The Israeli case, as I said, is totally different since the country is young and because water was such a crucial element from the very, very beginning. Therefore, everything was looked at from a national point of view, and it doesn't matter in which region in the country and in which sector. So this brings us to the point where we can see that from the early 70s, the issue of reuse was adopted on a national scale, on a national level, and continued throughout the years. So what you can see here is that those two graphs are separated, and while we are getting about 1 billion and something cubic meters of water from nature, we are able to produce a lot of artificial water in order to supply consumption, regardless of what we're getting from nature. And this is this slide was created by Professor Michael Gilmont from Oxford, who analyzed this very unique structure in Israel, and he called it the ability of decoupling growth from water consumption. And obviously, we, I mean, you and me as a kind of a supporter of India, wish to be in a situation where India has a vivid, dynamic agricultural sector, supplies water to its urban population, and has a great industry that is also flourishing and growing. But doing all of it in a way that is not harmful to the environment and not getting to the point where you say, okay, we would like to continue doing all this wonderful stuff, but we simply do not have water, enough water to support those endeavors. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, now let's look at the moment at the situation in Israel nowadays. So you can see in this pie the total water consumption in Israel. And the important part you can see here is that agriculture takes 50% of the total water consumption. And even more interesting to look at is the small pie. And here you can see that recycled water, brackish water, and floods are the biggest chunk of water for agriculture, much greater than potable water. On top of that, you can see the figures here that, as I said, we're getting about 1.2 billion cubic meters of rain every year, more or less. Some years are drier, some years are we are a little bit more blessed, but an average, while national consumption is 2.33 billion, meaning every year we have to produce additional 1 billion and a little bit more of water for the entire population. So big percent of it is water reuse, and as we see, agriculture takes a big chunk of the water consumption, and additional source of water is large-scale desalination plants that we put it aside in today's conference. Can I have next slide, please? Thank you. So what we see here is from this chunk of water treatment, and as Kavita said, there are about 550 million cubic meters of wastewater. Out of it, 93% is treated, and 86% goes back to reuse in agriculture. Now, in order to achieve that, as I said, we have to have the right mindset and the right cultural change. On top of that, very important is to have very clear, strong regulations. I mean, the worst thing can happen is that people are going to use untreated wastewater or treated not to the proper level of wastewater, and this obviously can be very dangerous to the consumers and to the environment. But first of all, human beings that would consume vegetables that were irrigated with untreated wastewater, this is very, very harmful and very dangerous. So regulation has to be in place. It has to be clear. It has to be relatively, as possible, simple, that in a way that everybody understands what can be done and what needs to be done in order to use the water. Second is you have to have people that are going to check and supervise that the regulation is in place and that things are really happening the way it should be. And this is, again, what is happening in Israel. You can see that there are different levels of treatment to wastewater, basically secondary and tertiary treatment. And then you can irrigate and use the treated wastewater according to your cultivation. So obviously, if you are growing trees for industry, you can use lower quality. And if you are using, and if you are growing strawberries, you would need to use the best quality treated water you can. Another important element is to have the linkage between the different stakeholders, meaning the municipality, the wastewater treatment plant, the farmers association. Everybody has to know what is their role and from which point to which point they take responsibility over the water. You have to have the right infrastructure, which means pipes and valves and all of this. And you have to have the reservoirs in order to keep the water to the point where you need to use it. Another important element in this complicated structure is, of course, economy. So everybody has to understand who is paying to whom and what are the motivations. So in the Israeli case, the most expensive water for agriculture is fresh water. And as I said, those are the most expensive water for farmers. And then treated water and brackish water price goes down. But a very important element that was a key point in order to push forward the wide usage of treated water was the fact that whenever there was a drought year in Israel, the first sector that wouldn't get the quantities that they were expecting were the farmers, because you don't cut on domestic use and you don't cut on industry. So inevitable is the fact that you cut on farmers' allocations. And the outcome was that farmers would have planted their yearly quantities. Maybe they have planted a new plantation that was supposed to grow for the next 20 years, avocado or olives, and all of a sudden they have no water and they have to take out the trees. So when they use fresh water, they cannot be on safe ground knowing that they are going to get their water. But if they use treated water, no surprises. They know for sure that they are going to get their water on time, the quantities that they have expected, and the price that they planned. So this is a very big support in order to encourage farmers to use treated wastewater. Next, one more element is that it has to have a very strong political support all through, from the regulation to the economy, to public opinion, to education and public awareness. Those kind of big campaigns have to have strong political support. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. In this slide, you can see this is a small map of Israel. If you can please click again and again. Great. So you can see this is the greater area of Tel Aviv, where majority of the population is concentrated and obviously produces big quantities of wastewater. Another click, please. And the water, wastewater that is generated here, and another click, please, goes after being treated to this large area in southern part of Israel, where a lot of agriculture, which is the main agricultural area of Israel. So this is a distance of about 60 kilometers, transporting the water from the urban area to the usage in the agriculture sector. In Israel, when things started, the concept was to have big wastewater treatment plants and to transport the treated effluent to be used in the agriculture area. Technology is improving all the time. And nowadays, the concept is gradually shifting from centralized wastewater treatment plant to decentralized wastewater treatment plant. And this is, I think, is exactly the solution that we are looking for in rural India, where we can find cities, small cities, villages that can generate wastewater and treat it on site and use it in the field next door, without heavy investments in pumps and pipes and on, but creating something very flexible that can be used on site. technology nowadays is very advanced, and with the right sensors, command and control systems, communication, you are able from Mumbai to control, I don't know, 1,000 small units all over the city and save on all the infrastructure work that otherwise you have to invest in. So I will put an end here, and I would like to summarize again with kind of the same mission. And this is to say that all the technology, regulation, economical structure, all of it can be put in place. The important thing is for the different stakeholders to say, okay, we join forces and we share the same vision about understanding the need to reuse wastewater and understand the value of it to the farmers, to the agriculture, to the environment, and look at it as a resource and not as like a burden that you want to get rid of it, which is more or less the situation in big parts of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Oded, for sharing these useful and really interesting insights, especially the slide and your thoughts on water decoupling, and then the last point that you made on, ensuring that we have a group of like-minded people who have a shared vision. I think I couldn't agree with you more. Israel has been an inspiration, and we look forward to our continued engagement and learning more about what can be replicated in India. Thank you once again, Oded. We now move over to the next session for the plenary from our partners, World Business Council for Sustainable Development. As some of you may be aware, WBCSD recently released a report, which is a call to action for all businesses to incorporate circularity, targets based on science and context, value water to reduce externalities and increase reuse, disclose beyond compliance, invest in partnerships, incentivize the value chain, and commit to wastewater zero, which is the name of the report. Tom Williams is Director of Water at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, leading the Council's member engagement, strategic and project work on water. He has deep experience working with nonprofit organizations in sustainable development, environmental awareness, water resource management, sustainability, and environmental science. He previously served as the programs director at the International Water Association. Tom has worked in both developed and developing countries with experience collaborating with a range of stakeholders, including utilities, government, research institutes, businesses, donor agencies, UN agencies, and NGOs. Tom, thank you for joining us this evening. Would love to hear from you about this report and also your thoughts on the topic for today, which is wastewater reuse, particularly in agriculture. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Kavita. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation to share some insight and thoughts on wastewater. What I will present today will be looking broadly at wastewater management and offer some perspectives around wastewater reuse in agriculture. For those of you who are not aware of WBCSD, very quickly, our background, we're a membership organization of around 200 leading companies that all embrace and embed sustainability within their governance and business models. We were conceived coming out of the 1992 Rio Earth Convention and formed a few years later. We're celebrating our 25th birthday this year. And WBCSD is set up to address systems transformation, so food, energy, mobility, financial, for example. And we do this through 6 programs where we engage with our member companies and partners on projects and advocacy. Next slide, please. Our work is driven by data and evidence. Could we go to the next slide, please?
Sorry, just a second.
Thank you.
Technology doesn't always rock, right? As much as we try to make this a seamless experience, there's always some issue. Seems to be some issue with these slides.
Dikla, if you can probably stop sharing and then share again, maybe
Yeah.
would help.
Let's try and share this screen. Sorry about that, Tom.
No problem at all. These things happen.
Are you able to see my screen, Tom?
Yep, it's coming up now.
Is that okay?
Excellent. Yeah, perfect.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Kavita. So as I was saying, our work is driven by data and evidence. So for water, and specifically for our topic today, wastewater, our work is informed by some of the significant global reports that have been published in the last 4 years or so. So from 2017's World Water Development Report, which was really a state-of-the-art on wastewater publication, if you like, through to the 2018 Progress Report on SDG 6, which concluded we are not on track to meet SDG 6 targets. The World Bank report from 2019 called The Invisible Water Crisis, which for the first time presented a global economic impact of water pollution. And we had the publication earlier this year in 2020 from WRI that put a cost on meeting our SDG 6 targets by 2030. And most recently, the annual report on water security from CDP, which focused this year on water pollution and particularly how business is disclosing information related to water pollution. So this series of publications takes us from a statement of scale, urgency, and dire economic consequences through to understanding the cost of fixing the water pollution problem and specifically what business can do more of. Next slide, please. So with this rich backstory, we set out to drive business action on wastewater to contribute to meeting SDG 6.3, because that's partially about wastewater treatment and reuse. So to do this, we framed the wastewater challenge as a climate issue, as a biodiversity issue, and as a water security issue. And we make the case that fixing the problem is far cheaper than a business as usual approach. So the Wastewater Zero report, which we published last month, really consolidates all of this knowledge and provides a concrete way for business to take action. Next slide, please. And the 3 critical parts of the report are the action framework. So this is 6 areas for business to frame their actions on wastewater management, a commitment mechanism, and also 5 policy asks. The action framework includes issues such as valuing water, so being able to understand externalities of wastewater pollution and to value water in order to incentivize wastewater reuse. It also highlights partnerships and the need for business to invest in partnerships, particularly public-private partnerships that bring co-benefits, and also improving disclosure, for example. So improving disclosure beyond compliance. For the commitment mechanism, which you see in green in the middle of that circle, we are calling on business to commit to wastewater zero. This includes commitment to releasing 0 hazardous substances into the environment from business-owned facilities and also their tier 1 suppliers. Secondly, it includes a commitment to increase the proportion of reused and recycled water from total water use. And then thirdly, it includes a commitment to treat all wastewater with low carbon technologies. Now, the scale and pace of business in taking action is largely dependent on the enabling environment, of course, and particularly the policy and regulatory space. So we've also provided 5 policy asks for policymakers to really support business in taking action on wastewater management. And these policy asks range from establishing clear standards and thresholds through to mechanisms to internalize externalities from wastewater pollution, all the way through to incentivizing the reuse of wastewater. Next slide, please. And as part of the report, we also looked at sectors where action is most needed. And to do this, we looked at the recent data from CDP. So this is data from over 2,500 company responses that they had last year, specifically looking at water pollution risk exposure. Now, what you would expect to see here are larger bubbles, meaning higher risk exposure in the top left and also on the right side, i.e. where there is high dependency on good water quality or high water pollution potential, you would expect to see the larger bubbles, the higher risk exposure. You'll see that there's two outliers. That's the apparel sector or fashion sector and the food, beverage and agriculture. Now for apparel or the fashion sector, it's a large wastewater producing sector. The UN estimates that 20% of industrial wastewater comes from this sector. So it's likely that their risks are externalized and the burden is with downstream stakeholders. For food and beverage, it's different as they are more a user of wastewater. Yes, please go to the next slide. So wastewater reuse in agriculture, as we are hearing and we'll hear today, is becoming a widespread practice. 10% of consumed food is reliant on food grown with contaminated wastewater, and about 7% of total cropland uses untreated or partially treated wastewater. This has negative impacts on yields and also obviously on human health if it makes its way into the food system. Studies both globally and nationally suggest that for yields, they are negatively impacted in and around 10%, above 10% in some instances where contaminated wastewater is used for irrigation. So here, the burden of risk is really with the farmer. The food and beverage sector should be doing a lot more to internalize these externalities. Next slide, please. And that in part is what we will be looking at WBCSD as part of developing a water impact protocol for the food system. This is part of a series of protocols that are currently being developed. There's one, for example, being developed on nitrogen and also food consumption. What this protocol will aim to do is to help business to quantifiably attribute water impacts to economic actors and their activities in their value chain. For example, being able to quantify and qualify water impacts related to farming or manufacturing or processing, recognizing that these will all be different for most businesses in different geographies, and translate that into economic terms and then prioritize where they can have most impact by making an intervention, so to reduce the impact. It will incorporate all the latest developments around science-based targets for water, developments related to water-related disclosures, water accounting, etc., and really attempt to determine how and when these different methodologies should be used to inform water impact assessments. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to briefly introduce some work on water circularity metrics, as this is a growing area of interest. It builds on work from our circular economy team at WBCSD, who earlier this year launched a circular transition indicators framework. So we are developing a water indicator to be part of this framework. It will look at circularity within a facility's operation, but also measure the circularity of source water and water outflows. So it's taking into consideration local context for measuring the circularity of source water and outflows. Next slide, please. These are the key indicators that are in development. As I mentioned, to the left, you see the water inflow indicator, to the right, the outflow indicator, and the one in between is to measure on-site circularity. What these indicators aim to help business do is to measure their circular water management and specifically then start pinpointing where they need to take action. To accompany the indicators, we'll be developing a tool which goes down to a very granular level of detail at a facility level for business to identify where to prioritize their actions. We'll also be developing supplementary indicators on nutrient and energy recovery, which are often embedded within wastewater streams, as I'm sure you're aware. That's it from me. I think we're going to see much more attention given to wastewater and wastewater reuse in the years ahead. And I think we've got a great opportunity to develop private and public partnerships to achieve important co-benefits for society and the environment. So I'll pass back over to you, Kavita, and happy to take any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are interested in reading the WBCSD report, maybe the team can post the link of the report in the chat. It makes for very interesting reading and makes a relevant reference to wastewater reuse certificates, which were co-conceived by the 2030 WRG and the Maharashtra Water Resources Regulatory Authority. And these are currently under consideration for being notified. So we'll just put up the Wastewater Zero report on the chat for those of you who are interested in reading it. Thank you once again, Tom, and thank you, WBCSD. We now move over to another very interesting presentation on insights into the draft National Wastewater Reuse Policy. Thank you, Birgit, Vikrant, Jeremy, and the team from GIZ and the Indo-EU Water Partnership for helping us put this together. The presentation will be made by Jeremy Bird, Water Resources Advisor for the Indo-EU Water Partnership. GIZ and the Indo-EU Water Partnership is working with the Ministry of Jal Shakti, NMCG, and other ministries in the central government and other stakeholders on the draft National Wastewater Reuse Policy. While many states in India have a wastewater reuse policy which focuses on various dimensions of wastewater reuse, including defined institutional arrangements in terms of host departments, wastewater reuse, treatment options, reuse options, O&M, and pricing, but a national framework is what is required, and then that can be adapted to local or regional context. So Jeremy is from the UK and specializes in water resources policy, institutions, and management. He has a diverse career working across Asia and Africa, including as Director General of the International Water Management Institute, CEO of the Mekong River Commission, and Senior Water Resources Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. At IWMI, he was responsible for a wide range of research themes, including resource recovery and reuse. Jeremy has supported policy and strategy formulation processes at national and corporate levels, including ADB's strategic directions for water, UNEP's freshwater strategy, and policy recommendations from the Bonn Nexus Conference. He is currently team leader for GIZ's support for formulation of a national policy on treated wastewater reuse in India. Jeremy will give us an overview of the highlights of this important policy in the making, and also about EU's wastewater reuse policy with specifications for agriculture and standards setting. Jeremy, thank you for joining us today, and I now hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Kavita. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely fine. Great,
thanks. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. As Kavita says, this is an initiative that is being supported by the India-EU Water Partnership and the GIZ support to Ganga Rejuvenation Project, and something which has really responded to many of the problems and challenges that have been identified by the previous speakers. I'd also like to recognize my colleagues on this team, Girija Bharat and Krishna Rao, who have been helping to put together this draft policy. Next slide, please. So we've heard today a little bit about some of the challenges and the issues that are driving the different initiatives for treating wastewater. And this policy that we're discussing today around the safe reuse of treated water really comes from those drivers around increasing scarcity of water, the importance of addressing some of the environmental and health issues of just discharging wastewater into the environment, the potential it has to reduce pollution and health impacts and so, for example, improve the environment through recharging lakes and wetlands. And as others have said already, it is the idea of looking at this as a resource, an opportunity that shouldn't be wasted, and to enhance and embrace this circular economy approach that provides a revenue stream for wastewater treatment. And as Kavita said in the introduction, it's quite interesting that only just about 20 or 25% of water is effectively wastewater is effectively treated in India. And many of the reasons that lie around the lack of financing and the lack of priority given to this. Next slide, please. But perceptions are already changing in India. We can see that at the moment, 12 of the states already have policies around reuse of treated used water, either approved policies or policies in draft form. That there's quite a lot of innovation happening at the moment around different business models for treating wastewater, and that this policy environment is sitting within a number of other policies that really link quite well into it. So we have the recent National Fecal Sludge and Septic Management Policy. We have a new national water policy in India coming soon, which is going to also reinforce the need for the circular economy approach. And then there's various other initiatives happening in industry with a push towards zero liquid discharge and recycling within industry. And on top of that, you have various missions and programs which are supporting things which are parallel to and complementary to the idea of treated wastewater. But there is this gap in the middle at the moment, which we're trying to fill. Next slide, please. You'll see that there's high-level support for this initiative coming from the Prime Minister, who at the end of last year, at a meeting of the National Ganga Council, made this pledge to highlight the importance of reuse and recycling of solid and liquid waste, and then mandated the Ministry of Jal Shakti to initiate a process of developing a policy, and that is now being coordinated by the National Mission for the Clean Ganga. Next slide. This policy, as I say, sits within an enabling environment of other policies, and it's we've tried to show this on the this circular economy diagram, which is on the next slide. I think it's.
Is it me or the slides are not changing on the?
I think that's changing a little slowly. It hasn't changed.
I'm still
yet.
on the perception slide. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're all on the perception slide. I think let me just share my screen again. I think
Okay.
there seems to be a bit of an issue with this. Sorry about this, Jeremy.
No problem. I can
think
carry on if you
technology
like.
doesn't always rock like we know, but I'm just going
No.
to try doing this again.
Yeah. Well, I'll while you're doing that, I'll just carry on a little bit, just in the interest of saving some time. So we see that agriculture, for example, is getting water mostly from raw water sources. Industry and municipal areas are getting water from water treatment plants, and at the moment, much of that water is going back into the environment in an untreated sense. And so, yeah, if we just switch on.
Sorry, Jeremy, can you see the slide?
I can now. If we go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay, great. So this policy, which we're calling the safe reuse of treated water, sits within the environment of the, as I say, national water policy, urban sanitation policy, FSSM policy, etc., to particularly address the issues of reusing waste from treatment plants back into industry, back into municipal use, drinking water, etc., and into agriculture, but also discharging back into surface water. And eventually, of course, that surface water may become a bulk supply for other uses, including industry and municipal uses, but after dilution in the natural water body. So we try to show on this slide where the policy is framed. And this is also complementary, I think, to the whole idea of integrated urban water management, integrated water resource management, and a river basin approach. And it does rely upon a significant amount of integration, both vertically from national level down to local level, but also horizontally across different sectors, as we can see here. And then the standards that are governing this at the moment are related to those set by CPCB and CPHO, and of course the oversight role of the National Green Tribunal. Yeah, if you go on to the next slide, I just wanted to share a little bit of information about a report that was also carried out under the same program and published last year and is available on the India-EU Watershed Partnership website. This comparative analysis of wastewater treatment and reuse in the EU and selected other countries, including Israel and Singapore, with the situation in India, and particularly some of the pioneer states that have gone ahead with these policies, like, for example, Gujarat or Haryana. And the interesting thing, I think, and one of the parallels that I'd like to draw from the EU situation is the fact of the diversity of end use of the treated used water. So here you can see, for example, in the case of the EU, where the UK, where I'm sitting, and the Czech Republic use the majority end use for treated wastewater is in industry, whereas in Italy and Spain, it's more for agriculture. And in Poland and Portugal, it's more for recreational uses. And I think you'll see the same diversity across the different states, which really calls for this national policy to have a flexibility and not be too directive in terms of how the priorities should be set, given also, of course, that this is a state issue within the governance of India. Next slide. I just wanted to be clear a little bit on what the policy does cover and what it doesn't. And so the sources of used water, and here we're actually trying to overcome some of the perception bias around wastewater by using the term used water rather than wastewater. And so this covers wastewater generated by households and commercial enterprises in both urban and rural settings. It doesn't cover industrial wastewater, mainly because that's being covered under a separate initiative on zero liquid discharge. But of course, special consideration is needed because we know in reality that quite often industrial wastewater is mixed with municipal wastewater, and that will be the case for several years to come before separate systems are completely established. And here we have a list also of the potential areas for reuse. And I'd like to stress here that because of the constitutional provisions within India, the priorities for this will be set by the individual states, depending on the prevailing demand and viability of the schemes, whether the predominance is on priority on agriculture or on industrial use, etc. Next slide. We've also coined a term called Apna Jal, or in English, our water, really to just like they did in Singapore, where they came up with this idea of new water for treated wastewater, just to again emphasize the fact that this is not a problem. This is not an issue that has to be sort of swept away. This is an opportunity not only to meet the increasing water demand, as was shown very clearly in that slide in Israel's case, but also to see it as an opportunity because the reuse of wastewater is actually an economic and financial opportunity. It provides an income stream which can finance and cross-finance the treatment of water to fill that sort of 80% gap in India at the moment, but also to cross-subsidize areas of use, in some cases in say agriculture, where the full costs of financing wastewater reuse, treatment and use may not be possible. So this is the vision: safe reuse of treated water across India, reducing the pressure on scarce freshwater resources, reducing pollution and the risks to public health, and achieving economic benefits. Okay, next slide. The scope of the policy covers, as I mentioned, the policy aims to set out principles and guidance. As I say, this is a national policy, and so its role is to guide the states in terms of adopting their own policies, to identify certain commitments and actions that can take place at central level to underpin and incentivize the uptake of safe reuse of treated water, and to provide a model regulatory framework or policy framework for the states to consider in developing their own policies, regulations, and implementing frameworks. I think the next slide just reinforces some of these objectives of putting India on the pathway of mainstreaming reuse, adopting this water cycle approach, and it could have multiple then reuses of the water. Emphasizing the government's commitment to sustainability, etc., and defining the roles and responsibilities of each of the different players. Importantly, at the finance side, if we go back a little bit, I think we just jumped ahead a couple of slides. Okay, I'll pick it up from here. Thanks. So this is the framework for the policy. We've just completed the first sort of working draft, which is being now circulated for interagency discussion, and then we hope within the next month or so will be available for public comment. But you see, it sets out the context for the legal and regulatory framework, the roles and responsibilities, particularly trying to differentiate between those which are more supportive and facilitative roles at the the national level, and those which are more the responsibilities for implementation at the state, municipality, and panchayat level. Setting out the water quality standards needed, and here the emphasis is very much around end-use standards which are fit for purpose. So looking at different standards that would be appropriate for different defined groups of users, so different for different industry types, different agricultural uses, etc., for edible crops, for non-edible crops, etc., for horticulture or aquaculture and forestry, which are all going to be quite different. And here I would say that probably one of the biggest challenges that's going to be faced, I think, in the implementation period is developing those end-use defined standards in a period of time to keep pace with, I think, what's going to be an acceleration of uptake of reuse projects. And then we looked at different implementation approaches, business models, and financing schemes. And I'll just talk about a few of those on the next few slides. So if we carry on. So reuse in agriculture, as I say, priority uses will be determined by each state. So we're not going to define what is the number one priority. The pricing regime will be dependent on ability to pay and what are the alternative sources of water. In some cases, fresh water, groundwater is already being used by farmers, is being used free. And the question would be, well, why should we then shift to wastewater if we have to pay more for it? In other cases, like I think in Maharashtra, and we'll hear later, that there is no alternative source of water and the farmers really are very happy to pay for a source of treated wastewater. So this is something which I think is going to be looking at on an individual context, and in the transitional arrangements will need to be done on a case-by-case basis. We also very keen to look at the issues. Now, if we go back just one slide, back to the agriculture slide, please. The fact that we know that a lot of this wastewater, untreated wastewater, is already being used informally in peri-urban agriculture. This is a prior use. It's a customer use. It's something which is not endorsed by the state or by the authorities, but it's something which is happening. And so it's going to be very important when looking at any new reuse projects to ensure that that prior use is addressed, and to bring those people into this sort of circular process where they can also benefit from treated wastewater. And so we're looking for mutually beneficial outcomes, or sort of win-wins, that will not only provide water to, say, industry or power stations, but also provide better quality water to agriculture. Also important there is the issue of food safety standards, and both for the domestic market and the export market. And this is something which will need particular attention. And we've seen, in some countries, for example, in Southeast Asia, I've been aware of cases where imports into the EU from those countries have been banned because of lack of compliance with water quality standards on food products. Next slide. I've already mentioned a little bit about the roles of the different agencies. At the national level, we have Ministry of Jal Shakti, who will be the responsible agency for overall facilitation and coordination, including operating a fund for supporting states to implement these programs. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which will be coordinating implementation amongst the states and providing technical support. We're proposing a national council and state committees and councils to be set up to coordinate this integration, I said, both vertically and horizontally, that's needed. And the very important role for CPCB and CPHO on establishing the end-use quality standards for different uses and for compliance. But it's the states that are really responsible for implementing this and setting up their own policies, their own targets for mandatory use, no freshwater zones, charging and pricing policies, etc., right down through to the urban local bodies and the Panchayat Raj institutions. Next slide, please. So I mentioned already on water quality that different standards are needed to be fit for purpose. It needs to be a risk-based approach depending on the end use. Compliance is absolutely essential for public health and for, as I said, in the case of food exports. Agriculture will need standards specific to the individual products. And each industry group or each industry cluster will have their own demands. I mean, textiles will be quite different to food processing, etc. And when it comes to aquifer recharge, we are proposing a precautionary approach. And I know that this is very sensitive and that measures will need to be put in place to ensure very high levels of compliance with strict water quality standards before injecting treated wastewater into aquifers. And this is something where another process will be needed to come to some agreement on exactly what is required. Next slide, on target setting, we see that so we're proposing some targets to be incorporated into this policy, that by the end of 2022, that list of 12 states that already have policies will be widened to include all the states within India. That those states that already have them will review them to ensure that they are eligible for national funding support under what we're calling the Apna Jal Fund, which will hopefully provide up to 50% of funding for new projects to provide an incentive to kickstart the sort of this revolution in wastewater treated wastewater projects. And then for individual areas, we're suggesting that where collection and treatment already exists, and this is, as I say, only about 20% of the cases at the moment, then that they would be the low-hanging fruit, the areas where we would hope to get 100% reuse by 2025, and that where collection and treatment capacity is either substandard or does not yet exist, that there would be 50% reuse by 2030 and 100% reuse by 2045. And then my last slide, next slide, is about the fund. This national fund, which would also have earmarked contributions from existing missions and programs. And then there will be a set of criteria for projects to apply to determine whether they are eligible for accessing this fund. And those are listed out here. But I just wanted to also emphasize that it's not all about subsidies. We also see there's a number of incentives that can be provided to encourage people to take up new projects, and those could be anything from tax breaks or waivers on particular charges or fees and things like that. And as was mentioned by Oded, I think in the Israel case, this idea that if you actually access, as a farmer, you access treated reused water, you're probably in a more secure position in a drought situation, because that stream of water is going to be continuous, rather than if you were dependent upon a source of fresh water and you were the third or fourth priority user for that water. So I think it's time to be sort of creative on how to incentivize this use. And I'll leave it there, and I look forward very much to the discussions in the panel sessions. And my colleague Garija is also online, and we can try and answer any of your questions that you post on the chat stream there. So thanks very much indeed.
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for sharing these insights into this important policy initiative. And we do hope that this will pave the way for clarity and direction to states, municipal corporations in framing local rules and guidelines in detail. I think it's so important to have a national framework which portrays a unified thinking by the government while also giving the flexibility to regulate, fix tariffs, set targets, incentivize or penalize as required. And I think a balanced approach would be a prudent start to encouraging adoption of a circular economy and slowly raise the bar. Now, diving into regional perspectives, we have with us two eminent experts in the sector, Shilp Verma and Vishwanath. And we have Dr. Mahesh Patankar from 2030 WRG to moderate the discussion. Just quickly about Shilp. Shilp has nearly 20 years of experience as a researcher in the water, energy, and rural livelihoods domain. Between 2001 and 2005, Shilp worked with the IWMI Tata Water Policy Program. In 2005, he was awarded an IWMI Fellowship to pursue MSc in Water Resources Management at UNESCO IHE Delft. After returning to India in 2009, he worked with various national and international organizations, including IWMI, Tata Trust, FAO, World Bank, GIZ, BORDA, etc. His educational background includes water resources management, rural management, and economics. In April 2019, Shilp joined IWMI as an internationally recruited scientist working on water, energy, food policies out of IWMI's office in Anand, Gujarat. In this role, Shilp provides leadership to influence policy aimed at sustainable resources management and economic growth in South Asia. He leads the IWMI Tata Water Policy Program and GIZ-supported project on solar irrigation expansion in India. Quickly about Vishwanath, thank you for joining us, Shilp. And Vishwanath is a water professional, civil engineer, and urban planner with 34 years of experience in the water, wastewater, and sanitation sector, and has worked on helping design rainwater harvesting, aquifer recharge, and wastewater recycling systems. He's currently with Biome Environmental Trust and Biome Environmental Solutions, an ecological architecture practicing firm. He is an adjunct professor and teaches on water at the Azim Premji University, Bangalore, and is also a member of the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance and the International Water Association. Vishwanath understands core issues around water in rural, urban, and India and international landscapes. He's a prolific Twitter user, a prolific YouTube user, not just in English, but several Indian languages as well. Vishwanath will share his thoughts on some unique perspectives on reimagining wastewater reuse. Thank you once again, Vishwanath and Shilp, for joining us today. I now hand over the floor to Dr. Mahesh Patankar, Senior Advisor with 2030 WRG, for moderating this discussion with Shilp and Vishwanath. Mahesh, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. And I must thank Kavita, you, Segi, Odit, Tom, and Jeremy for setting the floor for our panel discussions. I think it was a very interesting international global perspective right up to what the current thinking is on developing some national level policies. So as you rightly mentioned, we have two very interesting state level examples, one from Gujarat, other one from Karnataka. And what we thought we could do in this panel discussion is to spend about 5 to 7 minutes by each of the speakers, the panelists, Shilp and Vishwanath, to share their slides and primarily to set the stage for our Q&A. I am aware of the time that we are at 5:22, so we'll keep the question and answers floating into the chat boxes. But without further ado, I request Shilp to initiate his presentation. And we certainly would like to understand the way the IWMI has proposed and promoted wastewater recycle and reuse in the agriculture sector. There are several examples in multiple states. Specifically, it would be interesting for us to understand the Gujarat experiments and the water markets and the wastewater reuse market that evolved in Gujarat way back in 1970s or so. So over to you, Shilp, and if you could sort of spend about 7 minutes as a part of your intervention, that would be great. Thank you. Shilp? Yeah.
Thank you, Mahesh. And thank you, Kavita. I'll just jump into the topic. We can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
I think that most of the people here know these facts very well. So we are in a stage where we are urbanizing already very fast, and that is going to continue. but only 37% of the wastewater that is generated. And this is just, I think this doesn't even consider the groundwater use and the wastewater generated from it. Is actually, we have the capacity to treat 37%. How much of it is actually treated is, well, anybody's guess, because many of the wastewater treatment plants just end up accumulating wastewater. They don't end up treating them. But a lot of this wastewater is actually generated by class 1 cities. So what we can do in the 50 odd million plus cities that we have, it also generates a lot of wastewater, but roughly half of it is, well, there is treatment capacity for that. But in class 1 and class 2 cities and down below that, the treatment capacity keeps reducing, and more of that wastewater is released downstream without any treatment. So I am going to focus exclusively on municipal wastewater, so I will not talk about industrial wastewater, and I'm going to talk about its reuse in agriculture for irrigation. Next slide, please. So wastewater irrigation is not new. It's been happening all over the world. Here is a old snippet from Paris. US and UK were leaders in making sewage farms. Paris was actually, the sewage farm just outside Paris was famous all over Europe. People from all over Europe used to come and visit it because it produced such high quality produce that farmers from all over the continent used to come and visit it. Next. Now, we've done field studies in several states, in 17 locations, which are shown in the green map there. And we've, just in these 17 locations, we found that more than 57,000 hectares of area is irrigated with wastewater, which is almost all of it is municipal wastewater. There might be some industrial wastewater mixed, but most of this is municipal wastewater. And what we also found was that farmers are actually very smart. When they realize that a large part of their wastewater content is industrial wastewater, they don't use it for irrigation because it also destroys their land. So farmers do understand the dangers of irrigating with industrial wastewater. There is also favorable economics. So the fact that irrigating with wastewater reduces the cost that the farmers have to incur on adding chemical fertilizers is a big driver. And of course, the other big driver is scarcity of fresh water. Farmers have reported better yield and improved produce quality. There is awareness about the direct health impacts. And when I say direct health impacts, I mean the kind of skin irritation, etc., that farmers have because of the coming in contact with wastewater. And we've also found examples where farmers have taken precautionary measures like wearing long boots, rubber boots, and gloves while dealing with wastewater. And there are also a variety of institutions and business models that have come about, and some of them we have documented. But there is so far no national coherent policy, and that creates a lot of problems on the ground. So I'm glad that we just heard this presentation about the government's intent to come up with a policy. So if our work basically shows, and I'm glad that Alka is also among the participants here because she led the work on wastewater in the Untitled program. Our central argument has been that wastewater irrigation can convert this waste into a resource and farmlands into wetlands, which can actually be seen as a treatment process. The map in the middle is actually showing all the locations where there are documented cases of municipal wastewater being used by farmers for irrigation. Now, if there is one message that I want to convey to all of you from my presentation is that treatment of wastewater doesn't only happen in treatment plants. We need to understand that farmers' fields can basically play the same role as treatment plants. And that's what most of our field studies have shown. Next slide, please. Yeah. So coming to the nature of wastewater institutions, we found that back in the early 1970s, there were some wastewater cooperatives registered just outside Rajkot. So basically, the Rajkot Municipal Corporation went to villages peri-urban villages, and they asked to allow the municipality to take fresh water from them, and in place, instead of that, they would give the municipal wastewater to these villages, and the farmers form these sewage farms and wastewater cooperatives which would manage this. In many cases, in Ahmedabad, we found a case where the municipality actually encouraged farmers to lease land and then use that land for wastewater irrigation. In North Gujarat, which is a water scarce area, we have documented a case of a wastewater auctioning system where the municipality auctions its wastewater. This is for Unja town. And in that auction, the highest bidder, which is usually an individual entrepreneur, gets that wastewater. The municipality delivers it on his farm in a settlement pond. The water is allowed to settle there and exposed to the sun for basic primary treatment. And then that entrepreneur sells that water for irrigation to the farmers around that pond. Now, this is another system which, we don't know how many of these such innovative models are working around the country, because none of this is documented, none of this is formalized. All of this is happening in the absence of any clear policy statement. Next, please. So I will conclude by saying that how we are going to treat our wastewater will very often be a function of how much the household or the local government is willing to pay for it. Now, we've been talking about international experiences also. I think Singapore and Israel are at very different levels of per capita income. So unless we want to subsidize the whole process, well, 90%, we will need to come up with solutions which can work at the per capita income levels of India, especially in class 2, class 3 cities and below. In class 1 cities, I think municipalities can generate revenues very easily. So the solutions that we can come up with for Delhi, Bombay, Ahmedabad would be different from the class 2 and class 3 cities solutions that we need to find. And that's where bulk of the wastewater is being generated. Now, treating municipal wastewater to tertiary level, like Singapore does, robbing it of its nutrients and then reusing it, to me, it just doesn't make sense. We need to take advantage of the nutrient load of municipal wastewater, because that's what I think, in my view, that's what the circularity concept is all about. Rather than transporting it to a treatment plant, taking out the nutrients and then giving it back to farmers or to industries for use. So rather than allowing this process to happen by default, which is the case right now and happening on a much larger scale than most of us realize, we need to do this by design. And if we do that, I think somebody already mentioned, then cities can become the most reliable irrigation systems in the world, because no irrigation system can guarantee you water supply on 365 days in a year, but the city municipal system can actually do that. So here are some of the kind of preliminary conclusions that have come from our studies. We need to avoid mixing industrial wastewater, which is quite obvious. We need to take simple precautions to avoid direct impact for farmers coming in direct touch with wastewater. We need to find local simple treatment practices and encourage them. Intelligently select crops which are being used. There is some evidence that crops which grow closer to the ground might have greater chances of contamination. But if we are growing crops which are not edible, if we are growing cotton, for example, it should not be a problem to grow cotton with wastewater. Promote institutional innovations, such as the one, some of them I talked about, but there must be many others. And we need to also invest in research, apart from research in institutions, but also in the indirect impact or the impacts through the food chain. I think that there is not much evidence collected or generated in a systematic manner, at least in India. Elsewhere, this has been done. Next. So I just want to end by highlighting some of the publications which are all available online. You can go and read them. These are basically our studies from the different states. And if any of you cannot find them online, I'm happy to share them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Shelp, for a very enlightening presentation. And I think you demystified a few challenges that we always face when we look at wastewater recycled in the agriculture sector. You talked about the contaminants. You also talked about the importance of not mixing the industrial wastewater into the municipal wastewater and not losing the nutrients which are available for the farming sector. There are quite a few questions, but I'll just reserve those questions after to be taken up after Vishwanath's presentation. Vishwanath, over to you. If you could please do about 6 minutes, then we can.
I'll do my best. I'll do it within 6 minutes. Yeah, thanks. So maybe the full screen for the presentation would help.
Yeah. Can you see this slide, Vishwanath?
Perfect. So I call it formalizing the informal. And so I'll just describe, and it's a continuation of what Shilp has been talking. So it's not going to be too much of a repetition when I say it, that the key points, according to me, in the areas and zones that I work with, is that every city and town has to be considered separately. There cannot be a large-scale canvas which we can apply or a template which we can apply uniformly. My learnings are that each town is different. A metropolis is different, a small town is different, a medium-sized town is different, but also the ecological context and the environmental context where it is makes it different in terms of the wastewater generation, treatment, and reuse. So in many inland cities where we are working in Karnataka, it's already an embedded agricultural practice with large investments being made by farmers, not by the state or its institutions, but by farmers. Well, and as Jeremy already mentioned, wastewater policies will need to take into account this pre-use by the farmers, and therefore it should not end up diverting all the wastewater that they're using. Their livelihoods are at stake, and we know that agriculture and farming is in distress. And a prioritization of wastewater reuse on the lines similar to water. With water, we say domestic water use first, agricultural second, ecological third, industrial fourth. Perhaps we'll need to identify some of these priorities also in our wastewater policies, both at the national and the city level. So let me thank you for the next slide, please. So let me dive in and give you 4 examples of how wastewater is being used in the immediate environs of Bangalore. Here's the city of Tumkur with a population of 300,000. Top left, you see that the red square is a wastewater treatment plant. It's a basic oxidation pond. Treated wastewater comes into the lake. Also untreated wastewater comes into the 2 lakes there. The 2 lakes have an excellent command area. And the farmers have innovated and grown something called sweet flag, or bhaje as it is called, or wake. This is a medicinal plant. It's also a wetland plant. And it's capable of dealing with wastewater and its nutrients very well. And it gives the farmer a very good income. So some of the other photographs are of that particular plant. So what the farmers have done is understood their soil, understood the wastewater quality, and by experiment arrived at a crop that can grow very well with that wastewater and soil conditions, and also which has a market. Now, this kind of knowledge and wisdom has to be integrated into our wastewater policies as we go along. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Vishwanath, just a second.
Yeah. So, like I said, there's a flourishing agriculture. The turnover is about 4 crores or 40 million annually. 200 farmers are benefited, and 5,000 farm workers get seasonal employment in this. So, farmers allowed the STP to come up near the lake bed with a promise to make sure that the treated wastewater was available for them. So these promises cannot be forgotten when new policies and projects come up in the city. And apologies for the dog.
He wants to be part of the session.
Yeah, dog barking is part of the session. Sorry about that. Yeah, the next one, please.
Yeah.
And so then there's the next town, Vijaypura, which is a small town with 40,000 population. And as Shilp mentioned, here again, the farmers have understood that this is untreated wastewater flowing nearby. Their groundwater was depleted tremendously. And they experimented and came out with mulberry as the crop of choice. Note, both with bhaje and in the previous case and with mulberry, these are both non-edible crops. So the consumer of the food crops is not at risk at all. Next slide, please. And so what happens is that the mulberry is then fed to the silkworms, and it becomes silk cocoon and is transformed into silk saris. So with untreated wastewater, farmers with their fields as sewage treatment plants, as Shilp Verma mentioned, are capable of transforming wastewater into a silk sari. So this is the high quality value addition. And so the question arises, do we need a sewage treatment plant at all in such small towns as 40,000? And can't the farmers' fields be designed as sewage treatment plants? And therefore, we are faced with the fact that the NGT is the one which is determining standards for wastewater treatment, which includes biological nutrient removal. How practical are they, and how implementable are they? And should we not relook at these fit-for-purpose standards, as Jeremy mentioned, in the national water policy, but also at a small town level? Next slide, please. So what the farmers want is assured wastewater. They want an assurance that this wastewater will always flow, better drip irrigation systems for wastewater, and assistance with the right crop choice. So what we need is perhaps organizing of farmers, agricultural experiments and expertise coming in, and also research to ensure that the crop choice is best with minimum health risk and environmental risk. Next, please. And then we come to the metropolis itself. Bangalore, 13 million people, 1,600 million liters per day of sewage being generated, 1,100 being treated, about 500 not being treated. This flows out of the city in 2 rivers, and I'm showing you the green patches abutting the city to a distance of 50 kilometers, where untreated wastewater is being used by farmers. Top figure 3rd on the right. They pump it from these wells next to the river which is carrying the untreated wastewater. Huge investments are put in these pumping. They pump to distances of 7 to 9 kilometers. Sometimes farmers invest 27 lakh rupees or 2.7 million rupees individually to get this wastewater to their farms. They put it in a well and they use Netafim. The Israeli people would be happy that they use Netafim with untreated wastewater for their cultivation practices. Next one, please. And so what's happening is that in Bangalore, there's not a drop of wastewater which is generated, whether treated or untreated, which goes waste. All of it is consumed in agriculture, most of it informally. Now, if we are able to include this informal wastewater in our policies and regulate it to slightly formalize it, we would then be 100% wastewater using city. And we would be using as much wastewater as Israel generates and for the whole nation, right, from this one city of ours itself. So what farmers want is no industrial effluent in wastewater, assured flows, crop choice, which is linked to the market. For example, flowers, again, non-edible, advice on irrigation practice, and on-farm improvement of wastewater quality, if that's possible. Yeah. Next one, please. And so then Bangalore has gone on to this formal transfer of treated wastewater to fill the lakes in the drought-prone areas, districts around the city, up to a distance of 100 kilometers. About 500 lakes will eventually be filled. 1,100 million liters per day of treated wastewater, secondary treated wastewater, is now already being pumped. About 75 lakes have been filled in Kolar, about 30 lakes in a district called Chikbalapur to the north of Bangalore. This water fills the lakes. Next slide, please. This is being pumped by the minor irrigation department, which considers it a lift irrigation scheme. So as part of irrigation policy, irrigation water is hardly charged, and therefore this wastewater is also not being charged to the farmers. It fills up the lakes, like you see in the picture on the right. Next one, please. And then it recharges the ground. Farmers are not allowed to pick up this treated wastewater directly from the lakes. It recharges the aquifer, and what we observe is that the shallow aquifer is the one which is filled the most. Farmers pick up the wastewater from these open wells. They're using, most cases, drip irrigation systems, and they're growing crops like cucumber and many other crops, right? So this is one of the first projects of its kind where treated wastewater is being shipped formally for irrigation purpose to fill tanks. And this went to the Supreme Court to be arbitrated. And there's a panel formed by the Supreme Court and the High Court, which is overseeing the quality standards required. So there'll be many lessons which will be learned from this project. And I'm sure this will help not only the state water policy, but also other state water policies across India. Next one, please. So the last point that I want to make before you is, as you all know, most of you know, a vast hinterland of wastewater agriculture already provides livelihoods and employment to farmers. No formal institution mechanisms exist to monitor and manage this at the agriculture and the farmers' field levels. Farmers are making huge investments in pumping the wastewater. That has to be considered when we do investments in wastewater treatment and reuse for industrial and urban purposes. Fit for purpose treated wastewater should be made available, and that should be good enough. And farmers need technical assistance to manage soil and crops better. The World Health Organization has come out with something called the Sanitation Safety Plan, which is a risk-based approach rather than a standards-based approach. And Jeremy already mentioned that in the national water policy it's being considered. The Sanitation Safety Plan is an excellent framework to manage the risks between wastewater and agricultural use. Thank you for your time. I'm done.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vishwanath. And Kavita, with your permission, I'm just going to take 2 more minutes. There are several takeaways. Like, frankly, my notepad and the mind is sort of just flowing with everything that I've heard. But I would like to pose only 2 questions with a request for a 30-second answer to both Vishwanath and Shilp. So first question is to Shilp about pricing of the wastewater. So with there are a few questions on the chat box. So in this cooperative that you talked about in Gujarat, how did they deal with the pricing of this wastewater? And if you could just reflect a little bit on that in 30 seconds, that would be great. Shilp?
Yeah, so there is no set formula for pricing. I think that the one of the cooperatives actually is now defunct. It's no longer working. The issue is that even though it was set up in 1972, of course, the peri-urban area itself has shifted. What used to be peri-urban in 1972 is now part of Rajkot city. So there is no more agriculture in some of them happening. But in the case of Unja, where the entrepreneur is basically winning the wastewater in an auction, he's recovering cost plus is making his margin and earning a reasonable livelihood. And the farmers are happy to pay that.
Yeah, right. Thanks a lot, Shilp. And I have last question for this panel to Vishwan. You gave very interesting examples of choice of crops, wherein there is no increase of the pollutants in the food chain, except for some of the crops that you showed, which I'm not really sure of. But is there any kind of guideline available for the farmers to look at, wherein they can really decide that I want to grow this and don't want to grow this because it's going to disturb the food chain?
So there are no guidelines, unfortunately. So farmers themselves, with their sheer experience, have to balance their input soil and wastewater conditions, the irrigation waters that's available to them, and with the market demand for whatever produce they grow. So what one sees is that farmers are very deft and adept at it, and they do a thorough job. And there's therefore a lot to learn from farming practices on the ground. And that is very much essential as part of our policy writing or our investments that are to be made.
All right. Thanks a lot. So thank you, panelists. I'm sure Kavita will have to organize at least 4 hours of deliberations on.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mahesh. I think we grossly underestimated the time that we would need, perhaps.
Yeah. Over to you, Kavita, for the next panel.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahesh. So I think, thank you once again, Vishwanath and Shilp, for that very interesting discussion. We now move to the second panel discussion. In this session, we bring to you insights into some of the work we have initiated in facilitating provision of treated wastewater to a group of farmers in Zalta village, which is about 25 kilometers on the outskirts of Aurangabad, a drought-prone district in the Marathwada region of Maharashtra. These farmers from Zalta village, a couple of them have joined us today on the call, had been engaging with the POCRA, which is the Project on Climate Resilient Agriculture, and 2030 WRG, to help them get access to safe, clean water for irrigation. Yes, that was their sole plea. With frequent droughts, low groundwater levels due to climate variability and climate change, and limited alternate sources of income, their only alternative to overcome supply shortage was to pump raw sewage water or use polluted river water for farming. To work on providing an alternative source of assured water supply for these farmers, 2030 WRG has been working with the district administration of Aurangabad and the POCRA team and Aurangabad Municipal Corporation on a prototype to use treated wastewater for irrigation. This use can help improve adapted capacities of the farmers, as treated wastewater can be available throughout the year, and would help them increase farm productivity by bringing more land under cultivation. Also climate co-benefits such as reduction in energy consumption and reducing cost of chemical fertilizers, since, as we all know, treated wastewater contains organic matter like NPK. So today we have with us on the panel the team which is actually operationalizing this on ground. We have Shri Astik Pandey, IAS Commissioner for Aurangabad Municipal Corporation, Government of Maharashtra. Astik took over as AMC Commissioner in December last year, before which he was the Collector of Beed District, also another drought-prone region in Marathwada, where he had carried out noteworthy work in water conservation and pro-people and sustainable policies, and is now helping us steer our work in resource circularity in Aurangabad. Aurangabad, as we all know, has been one of the hotspots for COVID, but in spite of multiple priorities, Astik has helped steer this project forward, along with Mr. Panzade, the Chief Engineer of Aurangabad Municipal Corporation. Thank you, Mr. Pandey, for joining us for today's session, and thank you for your support, without which we would not have been able to get it to this stage. We still have some way to go, but like they say, well begun is half done. We also have Mr. Hadgaonkar from the POCRA team, who has been working with us tirelessly to get this project off the ground. And then we have 2 farmers from the Zalta village who are part of the Water User Association, the Wastewater User Association, which has recently been formed. And last but not the least, we also have Shri Eknath Davle, IS Secretary Agriculture, Government of Maharashtra. This session will be multilingual. We will be speaking in English, Hindi, and Marathi. We will start the session with Dr. Anjali Parasnis, who is our technical consultant, who will provide an overview of the work being done in Aurangabad. Anjali has been leading and facilitating the discussions with the farmers and the Aurangabad team, the Aurangabad Municipal Corporation, Pokhara, and many others to facilitate the process of providing treated wastewater to a group of farmers in Zalta village. Anjali, over to you.
Thank you, Kavita. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Kavita, can we go to the
Yes.
next slide, please?
Yes.
So while Kavita is adjusting the slides, and she has already given an overview about Marathwada region, she has told us that it is drought prone. So what is most interesting is the Pokhara project is working with almost 450 villages. And what we thought is if we can develop one prototype, one pilot project at one of the villages, it can be very easily scaled up and replicated across both Marathwada and Vidarbha, which are the drought-prone regions and where the Pokhara project is getting implemented. So when we first visited Aurangabad, the first task was to interact with several farmers. So we visited different villages around in the peri-urban area of Aurangabad, and we interacted with them and realized that they are really facing several problems. As you can see in the left-hand corner, the water that they are pumping into their farms is full of chemicals. If you actually visit it, you can smell the organic contents into it. There is a large content of soap, and that was leaving a white crust on their soil and also some layer of oil. But farmers do not have any option, and that is why, as you can see in the left bottom slide or the picture, you can see that systems have been put up into a stream where the wastewater was released from a sewage treatment plant. So in this peri-urban area of Aurangabad, as one can notice, there are several farms, and there is a STP which is located right in the middle of it. So there was a very good opportunity to see if the treated wastewater could be directly transported to the farmer's field rather than that getting released into the nearby nala or the stream. So what happens, the problem here is like what Vishwanath was mentioning, that in this stream, the treated sewage water gets mixed up with the industrial wastewater, and that is what is creating the problem. So this was the problem statement, and what we wanted to make sure was that the water which is treated and released from the STP plant can directly go into the farmer's field. May I have the next slide, please? So basically, it was also important to see and test the samples of the water, of the soil, the plant parts, and also the cows which were being fed using the fodder which was grown using this wastewater. So we were very lucky to get support from IIT Mumbai and also from Pokhara team of Aurangabad. So we conducted 2 different experiments, and in one we found the presence of heavy metals like cadmium, mercury, and lead, etc. Which was getting bioaccumulated across the food chain, and it was also found in the milk samples here. And the second experiment what we conducted was collecting and testing the soil and water samples along the stream. So both these experiments showed that the tested samples of untreated water were found to be unfit for irrigation. And that was actually a cause of concern even for the farmers. And in our interaction later on, they are also going to narrate their own experiences. So I'll leave that part to the farmers only. There were some very important milestones which were very encouraging for us. First of all, we could form first of its association of the wastewater users at the Zalta group, and all thanks go to the farmers of this village. They were very keen to come forward, form an association, and start using this treated wastewater. Very recently, the EOI, that is expression of interest, was also displayed at the Zalta Gram Panchayat, so that each and every farmer of the village could get access to this EOI and come forward and form several groups. So at the moment, we have formed the first of its kind of group containing 10 farmers, but that will be replicated because there are around 100 farmers in that area which could get benefited of this treated water. The most important part here was that what will be the rate of this treated water, and for that matter, the MWRA tariff card was very useful for us. As you can see here in the slide, the rates are really very, very negligible, and the farmers have agreed to pay these rates. And not only that, they have also agreed to pay for the conveyance system, for pumping, for setting up the pipelines, etc. And most importantly, they all agree and understand the significance of the drip irrigation. And the Pokhara team is also helping the farmers to set up the drip irrigation into their farms. So if this entire pilot scale experiment, which would get completed in next few months, if it works out, then all these 10 farmers would be irrigating their farms using the drip irrigation mechanism and using the treated wastewater. So I think this will be one of its kind pilot scale experiment that will be implemented in the Pokhara villages. And as I told you earlier, it can be scaled up to more than 450 villages. Next one, please. It's also very heartening to see that the Aurangabad Municipal Corporation has given permission to lift 2 MLD water, and the farmers are very excited to get this permission. Now, the next steps would be that the Wastewater User Association will get registered, and a detailed project report will also be formulated so that many farmers can take part of this and they can get benefited because of this treated wastewater. So carrying out the impact assessment, socio-economic, environmental, qualitative, as well as quantitative parameters will be the next steps that we will be following up. Next one, Kavita. This experiment would have several different dimensions, and wastewater will not only be used for agriculture, but also we have a plan to see that how wastewater can be reused for afforestation. Then there is a sludge management, some other resources also which could be tapped into. And Aurangabad is a very good example, very good case where we have assessed the potential of sludge generation and also for biogas production, which will also help reduce the carbon emission of the entire city. And also the resource circularity can be very well established by just managing the sludge as well as the wastewater at the city level. So there are several opportunities of revenue generation. Even the farmers would get benefited in the long-term perspective. Climate change is one very important driver of the region, and we hope that by ensuring this resource circularity, the climate resilience also would be built up. At the same time, the carbon neutral water utilities could also be formed. So these are some of our plans which are in the offing, and we will be completing in next few months. Next one, please.
Yeah,
Thank
Anjali, I think,
yeah. And over to you, Kavita. We also have the farmers, and we will be happy to interact with them. Yeah.
Most certainly. So I think maybe thanks, Anjali, for that great overview. We have, like I mentioned, Mr. Astik Pandey, who's the Aurangabad Municipal Commissioner. And if we can just turn this over to you, Mr. Pandey, I think, like Anjali mentioned, and we all know, you recently provided a permission to supply 2 MLD of treated wastewater from the Zalta STP to the farmers of Zalta Gram Panchayat. Can you tell us a little more about this arrangement and how the supply would be useful to farmers, and also your thoughts and plans on scaling up the model beyond Zalta? Mr. Pandey? Astik, are you online?
He joined?
Yes, he has, sir. I spoke to him like 15 minutes back, just before we started this presentation. One sec, he's just calling me. Yeah, Astik, are you? Maybe you can unmute your mic. Yeah. I am not able to see you. Anjali, can you see Astik online?
No, I am also not.
No, Astik is not
His video
online.
is on. Kavita, his video is on.
Yeah, Kavita, we can see him, but I think the audio is not connected. Could you please request him to reconnect his
Maybe you
audio?
can unmute it, Astik, is what they're saying. We haven't unmuted. Okay.
If Mr. Hatkawkar
Yeah, we
is
can
there,
see
you
your
can
video. We can see your video, but we are not able to hear you. Okay.
unmute.
No, he. 1 minute, Astik. So he is. He's.
Yeah, I can see.
We haven't muted you. We haven't muted you at all.
I think the audio is not being
Meghna, is there any muting that we have done centrally?
No. The audio has not been connected. Could you please request her to reconnect his audio?
Can you reconnect your audio, Astik? Is that possible? Just reconnect. Otherwise, we'll do some jugaad. Maybe we can just connect you on WhatsApp or something. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sure. I'll be on hold. He's just trying to reconnect. Please bear with us. We haven't muted you centrally at all.
Astik is coming in as Astik, or he's coming in as some other name?
Astik Pandey. AP. Astik Pandey.
Because, yeah, no, but earlier I could not see his name at all.
No, he's there. It's Ankit Pandey.
Astik Pandey.
Yeah, but there is another, Municipal Commissioner Aurangabad. That's the one. No, there is another Ankit Pandey as well. Yeah. I saw that.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm saying Aurangabad.
Aurangabad, yeah.
He's not muted.
No. In fact, this is not muted, Astik. I can just see it. There's no sign on this. Yeah, sure. Just for everyone, he's just trying to reconnect. So please bear with us for a few seconds.
This conference will not be complete unless Astik participates.
Okay, so now I'm gonna put you on speaker, Astik. Okay, I think this is like technology at its jugadu best. 1 second. Bakshi sir, can you hear him?
I can't hear him. I can't see him also.
Astik, can you speak now? I've just put you on speaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
First, I would like to thank Kavita and Anjali to me an opportunity. And it was since 1.5 hours I was online. I was hearing all ideas given by Jeremy, Mark, and other team members. An excellent
Sound is not very clear, Kavita. Kavita, sound is not very clear.
1 second. Bakshi sir.
Clear. Can you just
1 second.
Okay.
We can't see you.
Close to the mic. Please.
Can you switch on the video?
Yeah, I think I can hear you now, Astik, online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Anjali and organizing this webinar, important stakeholders. Same time, since 1.5 hours I was online and I was hearing.
Astik, shall I just disconnect from the WhatsApp? I think you've connected online. 1 second. Let me just check with Bakshi sir. Can you hear?
I can hear you, not Astik.
No, because he's.
I think participants can hear my
I can see Professor. Yeah,
Yes,
I can hear you.
now
Astik,
we can.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good, very clear.
Lovely. Thank you, Astik. Maybe you can start over.
Please start.
Astik?
Just to mention, I am here. Sir. Hello.
Yeah,
Sir,
yeah, Mr. Eknath can be seen. Eknath. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, yeah, you are seen now. You are seen now. Astik, you are seen. Yes. Meghna, you have to coordinate.
Yes, sir, Eknath. Hand raise. Just raise hand.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you also.
Yeah, just I raise my hand. Just
yeah.
We can see you.
Astik?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Please start over.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely. Loud and clear.
Okay, then, sir, first I would like to pay my thanks to Kavita and Anjali. And since 1 hour, I was listening to all speakers. It was an excellent session about reuse of wastewater. In fact, in Aurangabad, when I joined in December 19 as a municipal commissioner Aurangabad, I found that there is one good thing, one good aspect. It was in Aurangabad. That was the 180 MLD TP water treatment plant. That plant was successfully working in Aurangabad city and treating the whole wastewater generated in Aurangabad city. So I was trying and I was looking for opportunities for revenue generation from this STP water. So I was thinking about many options and exploring the viabilities of different ideas. In meantime, Kavita and Anjali contacted, and then we had a webinar with Bakshi sir, and obviously he gave us a good guidance, and he expected that Aurangabad Municipal Corporation can play a positive role and set an example for other cities that how to use this STP water for various purposes. So I was very excited, and when Anjali and Kavita contacted us for approval to lift 2 MLD water for farmers, then it was an opportunity. And we were thinking that by giving this approval and by taking active and by playing active role in this whole idea and setup, we can set an example. We have a very few examples like Surat Municipal Corporation. They are using the wastewater and generating the revenue. So I was looking forward. It was a pleasure for Aurangabad Municipal Corporation that we are playing an important role by giving to lift approval. By giving approval to lift 2 MLD water for farmers. In fact, farmers, they are also a very key, they are also key stakeholder in this whole plan that we are going to execute. Now, contact between farmers, Zalta Gram Panchayat and AMC. That contract process is in process. We are hoping that very soon we will go under the contract and we will able to showcase other cities and other farmers also that STP or wastewater can be reused for various purposes. In fact, as a Aurangabad Municipal Corporation, we are also exploring. We are speaking with MIDC also, sir, Bakshi sir and Dawle sir, for just to update you. We are speaking to MIDC also, and we are planning that we will be able to provide this STP water to MIDC at cheaper rate. So we are working on that idea also. In fact, very soon we are establishing a tertiary plant at our STP. In fact, when Jeremy was presenting that funding model, I saw that fund can be provided for establishing a tertiary plant at STP. So, sir, if I get, if Aurangabad Municipal Corporation get that opportunity, sir, it will be very good. So, Aurangabad Municipal Corporation will be able to play two roles, sir. We can provide STP water to farmers or farmers also to MLD, and rest water we can divert for MIDCs. We have many active and flourishing MIDCs. So the MIDC can use that water, and it will be a win-win situation for every stakeholder, sir. Like MIDC will be get the water at cheap rates, at reasonable rates. AMC, Aurangabad Municipal Corporation, will able to generate the revenue from wastewaters, and same about the Gram Panchayat, sir. So, sir, on my part, and I am very excited, and I am ready to experiment, to implement this pilot project, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kavita.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Astik. That's really heartening to hear. And we really look forward to continuing to work with you and continue to build the momentum that you've helped us gather. We now turn over to Pokhara, to Anil Hadgaonkarji, who is, who's been helping us coordinate the entire project on ground. And maybe Hadgaonkarji, along with the farmers, if you can tell us about the ground situation, the main constraints of the farmers related to sourcing of water, what were their pleas and requests, and how wastewater treatment would be useful for the Pokhara region. Hadgaonkarji, maybe Anjali, you could help translate the question for the farmers, and maybe we can move into that in a few minutes.
Yes, sure, Kavita. Hadgaonkarji, ट्रान्सलेट करू का त्यांना आता प्रश्न असा विचारला गेलाय की त्यांना कसा फायदा होणार आहे, हे जे ट्रीटेड पाणी त्यांना जे मिळणार आहे त्यांनी त्यांचा कसा फायदा होणार आहे हे त्यांना सांगायला रिक्वेस्ट करा.
आधी सुराशी साहेब सांगतील की त्याचा फायदा कसा होईल. बोला तुम्ही मॅडम. ओळखून द्या.
So we have two farmers.
Kavita.
Yes, sir.
These are two farms.
Yeah.
Of
no, absolutely.
And we will try to translate from Marathi to English. Yeah. Sure. Let the participants understand that they are going to be the participants in users. Sure. They are going to be the users in Zalta village.
Sure, sir. So just like Bakshi sir mentioned, we have Anil Hadgaonkarji, who is from Pokhara, and then we have two farmers with us, Surashe Kaka and Rima Tai, who are working with Pokhara and with 2030 WRG on this initiative. So basically, we are going to ask them how this whole arrangement is going to help them alleviate some of their challenges on wastewater, the hitherto arrangement of using untreated wastewater for irrigation. So the question that we first asked is, what is the problem really? औरंगाबाद में पानी की क्या समस्या है और ये कितनी गंभीर है और आपकी खेती पर क्या प्रभाव पड़ा है इस ये untreated wastewater use करने के वजह से? Hadgaonkarji and Anjali, maybe you can translate the question for the farmers.
Yeah. So Kavita, they will understand the question in Hindi. So once they answer, then I'll translate it into English. Yeah. Surase Kaka, सांगा तुम्ही.
नमस्कार मॅडम, गजानन सुराशे. खराब पाणी वापरल्यामुळे माणसाच्या आणि जनावरांच्या आरोग्यावर पण परिणाम होतोय. पण नाविलाज चांगलं पाणी नसल्या कारणाने नाविलाजाने लोक ते पाणी वापरतात. समजा खराब पाणी त्याने उत्पन्नात फरक होतोय इतकं नक्की आहे, पण जमिनीचं आरोग्य सुद्धा खराब होतंय आणि माणसाच्या आरोग्यावर त्याचा विपरीत परिणाम होतोय सर. टायफॉइडचे पेशंट जास्त आहे, कॅन्सरचे पेशंट पण जास्त आहे आणि थंडी ताप हे रेग्युलरच आहे. आणि मलेरियाचे पेशंट पण जास्त आहे. त्वचा रोगाची बी थोडी अडचण आहे त्या पाण्यामुळे उभी राहिलेली आहे आता. आणि वापरायचं पाणी जवळजवळ सगळं खराबच आहे. पिण्याचं पाणी आमच्या गावापासून 9 किलोमीटर दूर असलेल्या गावातून पाणी येते.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Surase, he is part of the Water User Association. He is one of those 10 farmers who have signed the agreement. And what he is saying is that there is an impact not only on the health of the human beings, the villagers, but also on the cattle. So he's saying that there is higher percentage and probability of cancer in the village, as well as the malaria and also the skin infections. He also told us that the soil quality is also getting deteriorated. They are not getting a good supply of drinking water, that which is also contaminated. So he's saying that if he gets this treated water, it will have multiple benefits for him. And they hope to have a better health quality as well as drinking water quality in the village.
Lovely. Thank you, अंजलि. अभी एक दूसरा सवाल हम आपसे पूछेंगे कि ये जो वेस्ट वाटर ये फार्मर्स का जो गट बना है, इसके अंतर्गत फार्मर्स ने ये तय किया है कि वो पानी के लिए पैसे देने को तैयार हैं और जो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी का कॉस्ट है पानी को पंप करने के लिए उसका भी खर्चा उठाने को तैयार है. आप बोलेंगे?
सूर्यसे काका प्रश्न असे विचारले तुम्हाला की तुम्ही पाण्याचे पैसे द्यायला तयार आहात आणि पंपिंगसाठी पण तुम्ही जे काय खर्च असेल तो सगळा खर्च उचलायला सगळे फार्मर्स तयार आहेत. तर ही तयारी तुमची खूप चांगली आहे, स्तुत्य आहे आणि त्याचे तुम्हाला आणखीन त्याचे काही परिणाम किंवा काही फायदे आणखीन दिसून येतात का?
जसं चांगलं पाणी वापरल्यामुळे ठिबक पण वापरता येईल आणि दुसरी भाजीपाल्याची पिकं पण घेता येईल. तुषार वापरता येईल, ठिबक वापरता येईल आणि सिंचनाचं क्षेत्र वाढेल, जे आता लिमिटेड आहे त्याच्यापेक्षा थोडंसं जास्त बागायत होईल आणि उत्पन्नात फरक होईल.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Surase said that they have invested this money and because of that they hope to expand their irrigated land, and most importantly they have realized the importance of drip irrigation, and he's very ambitious that he would like to use the drip irrigation, and because of that whatever cost will be incurred for setting up the system, the pumping system, as well as the charges of water, they are more than happy to bear those charges because of these advantages that they see.
Sure, that's great. Thank you अंजलि and thank you सुराशि काका. और इसके अलावा और कौन-कौन सी बातें मंजूर हुई हैं औरंगाबाद ग्राम पंचायत के साथ? अभी रिसेंटली आपका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट साइन हुआ है, तो उसमें से 2-3 चीजें आप बता सकते हैं हमें जो मंजूर हुई हैं.
सुरेश काका कविता असे विचारते की आता जे आपण आता कॉन्ट्रॅक्ट जे आपल्याला पांडे साहेबांनी जे आपल्याला दिलाय ना 2 MLD वॉटर लिफ्ट करायचं, तर त्याच्याबरोबर आणखीन काय गोष्टी मंजूर झाल्या आहेत असं कविता विचारते.
नाही आता तुम्हाला जो वापर करायचा त्याच्याबरोबर तुम्हाला ते चार्जेस तुम्ही देणार आहात बरोबर. चार्जेस इलेक्ट्रिसिटी तुम्ही चार्जेस भरणार. तर वॉटर युजर असोसिएशन के लिए मैडम हेलो.
यस
बोला.
अभी तो उन्होंने पायलट बेसिस पे एक वाटर यूजर एसोसिएशन उनका रजिस्टर करने वाले हैं.
Okay, so they're saying that for this pilot scale project, the permission has been given, and whatever are the other terms and conditions that the villagers would agree to that.
Okay. Any other thing that Surashi Kaka or Rima I would like to share? Anjali, maybe you can just ask them anything that they would like to share with us.
सुरासे काका अजून काही तुम्हाला काही सांगायचं आहे का? इथे सगळ्या जगभरातून जवळजवळ 100 जास्ती लोक आलेले आहेत आणि ते तुमचं बोलणं ऐकतायत, तर तुम्हाला आणखीन काही त्यांना सांगायचंय का?
याच्यामुळे फायदा काय आहे? सांगा तुम्ही बोला. प्रशिताई बोलते मॅडम. प्रशिताई बोलतात.
हा बोला ना.
तुम्ही कॅमेरा
बोला.
त्यांच्यावर फोकस करा. त्यांच्यावर कॅमेरा.
नमस्कार मॅडम, मी रीमा सोनवणे बोलते.
नमस्कार मॅडम. नमस्कार रीमा ताई.
फायदे काय सांगा. म्हणजे आता सध्या कसं पाणी तुम्ही करताय आता जे वापरते
आम्हाला दूषितच पाणी आहे, त्याच्यामुळे आम्हाला खूप त्रास होतोय.
आता ते पाणी आता ट्रीटमेंट केलेलं पाणी आपलं वापरणार आहोत, त्याच्यामुळे काय फायदा होणार?
मला एक सांगा रीमाताई, मला एक सांगा, दूषित पाणी घेण्याची आवश्यकता का असली?
पाणी नाही सर, दुसरा आम्हाला इलाज नाही ना.
इलाज नाही ना, इलाज आहे.
दूषित पाणीच आहे ना आमच्या इथं, दुसरा नाही.
म्हणजे तुम्हाला फ्रेश वॉटर ताजं पाणी तुम्हाला
Okay, so
असंच
Reema
म्हणायचं ना
Tai,
तुम्हाला?
she is. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Anjali, please go on.
Yeah. So Reema Tai is a leader of the Farmer Association, and she's very vocal about her issues, and she's saying that they have no other option but to use this polluted water, and that is why they have been using it. And if they get treated water, it will have many advantages.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Reema Tai and Surasha Kaka and Hatgaonkar ji. We also have Mr. Kavle, like I mentioned, with us today. Thank you sir, for joining us. I think you've heard the team, you've heard the Pokhara team speak, and you've heard it from the farmers and the work that we are trying to do with them. What are your thoughts from a user perspective?
Kavita, your voice is breaking. Maybe you can just adjust your mic.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Anjali. So just turning this over to Mr. Dable, just to bring him into this discussion and a couple of questions that we thought we could share with you. So what are your thoughts from a user as Department of Agriculture on this subject? And how can we work towards institutionalizing this whole arrangement? This is a very small beginning that we've made, as you can see, but your thoughts, we'd love to hear your views on this, Mr. Dable. Mr. Dable, can you hear us? I think his mic is on mute. Just call.
It's not on mute. Mr. Dable?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now, sir. Yeah, please.
Hello?
So I'm not sure can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So just your thoughts from a user perspective as leading the Department of Agriculture on this subject. How do you think we can work towards institutionalizing this whole arrangement?
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable Baksh for the today's deliberation. This is basically initiative started under the guidance and the leadership of Honorable Water of this used water can be reused for the purpose of the agriculture. Sir, I'll just quote 1 to 3 incidents and then we'll come on. When I was working as a divisional commissioner Nashik, so most of the water which basically was treated by the Nashik Municipal Corporation, already sir, corporation area, but that water which was used, so that water was treated and again was but because of the issue of the BOD standard, so that BOD standard was up 20, and then the water was released in the river. The moment water gets stagnant, again that multiplication of the bacteria was there and there was a problem. So there was a proposal that how this water can be used for the agriculture, and there was a demand from the agriculture also. Of that stagnant water use this water for that purpose. Sir, there are some issues regarding the issues of the quality of water, and there needs to be have a detailed investigation on the use of such waste use water. There might have been such level. Even NIRI had done good research, because when we were using the they had decentralized water treatment plant, and they used some vegetation, and they found that some plants are more user friendly, more friendly, and more responsive to the wastewater. Particularly when the ammonia percentage, they are more responsive to that water. So in similar lines, if we could find out that which are the agriculture crop which could sustain such a higher level of the BOD, because most of the has the salt element. Most of the water has the sopenific after this soap water used to those soap. They are more and more, it's more of alkaline type of soil. Even some sort it becomes the salinity is so I think, sir, we should with the help of the help of our university and the Valmi this taken the river. I think some farmers are using water, and I know when I was looking demand of the farmers to construct the KTVs on that stream. But since I was a bit water, and if the I think we told them that at least one can be worked out, one KTV can be worked out, and we can see the result. Probably that was the strategy we have taken. So as there is a acute shortage of water most of the time, so I think the reuse is the most welcome step, sir. But only point is that we need to identify the crops more suitable for such type of water, and because of that the quality of soil will not deteriorate. If these two aspects is being considered, initiatives, as the government of Maharashtra has already formulated, the GR has been issued accordingly. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you, WG. And I now invite Mr. Bakshi, who recently retired as chairman of MWRRA. We continue to seek his inputs and guidance on many dimensions of wastewater reuse and management. Thank you, sir, for your support and guidance. And you've been with us in this journey from the beginning. We would love to hear your reflections and closing remarks for a roundup of this session. Over to you, Mr. Bakshi.
Yeah. Thank you, Kavita. Do I have 10 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes?
Yes, 10 minutes, sir. Yeah.
We had planned for 4 to 6, and now it is almost 6:30.
6:30.
So
Yeah.
I suppose we can take another 10 minutes to wind up everything. First of all, let me thank you, Kavita and Meghna and Dr. Patankar and Anjali, that you have organized this webinar very well, where on the one hand you have got international experts from Israel, and in the speech of Jeremy as well as Mr. Tom Williams, we learnt a lot. At least I learnt a lot as to what is happening in India itself. Because they look at India from outside, we look at India from inside, and therefore there's a difference in the outlook itself. Once you look at India from outside, you are able to compare with other countries, and then you can find out what is deficient in India. Whereas when we look at India from inside, to look at entire India because we are limited to some state only. For example, I work mostly in Maharashtra, so I know mostly about Maharashtra and not much aware about Gujarat or Karnataka. So this is one you have done, is you have brought international experts on this platform, and on the other side you have got people who are very important at ground level. For example, municipal commissioner in Maharashtra is supposed to be very, very important person. He is not only important because of the portfolios that he handles, he is also important because people look at him as a very important person in the government setup to provide help to them. And therefore, municipal commissioner, at least in Maharashtra, is very, very important. Then you have the agriculture secretary, Mr. Eknath Dole, who himself is an expert in agriculture. He has got agriculture background. He has a formal background in agriculture sector, and he has worked in various capacities as divisional commissioner, then Latur collector. He did a lot of work in soil conservation, water conservation, etc. So on the other side, you have got experts from IMI and from the different parts of the country and different institutions like NEERI, etc. So first of all, my heartiest congratulations to you for having done this excellent job of putting all people together. And there were a lot of questions. I have seen some of the questions which have been raised by some of the participants. Address a few which I remember. and rest of the questions answers can be given by you later on. But some of the questions are very pertinent. I remember one of the questions was that if fresh water is available so cheaply in India, then why should anybody take the treated water? It's a very, very important question. And I think it was raised by Navneet Anand, who is an expert in the water sector. He has a formal education in water sector. So that is the moot question in India. If fresh water is available very cheaply, why should anybody go for the treated wastewater? This point has to be kept in mind, and therefore, when Jeremy will recall and he will correct me, that when the national policy on wastewater reuse was being discussed, I had an opportunity to make a presentation before the Director General of NMCG, when Jeremy and his associates were also present. And I did say there that in Maharashtra, there is a village called Zalta, and it comes around the municipal corporation of Aurangabad, which is a central municipal corporation in the state of Maharashtra. And we had mentioned that this village is very enthusiastic. The farmers are wanting to take the treated water for their use. They are also willing to pay. And therefore, this point was noted by the participants there in the forum, in the meeting of Namami Gange, where Mr. Mishra was chairing that meeting. So that is my first remark about your success in this webinar. I happen to be associated with the 2030 Water Resources Group because I also was given the responsibility of heading a work stream on reuse of wastewater in the urban localities in Maharashtra. And therefore, the government of Maharashtra roped me in for working on the wastewater reuse, and therefore I started working with the 2030 Water Resources Group, firstly with Dr. Patankar and thereafter with Kavita. Let me for the benefit of participants, let me summarize some of the very important things which were told by Odette or by Tom or by Jeremy, and also by IMI experts and Mr. Vishwanath. Very, very important points have been brought out by them. Let me take one by one, and I will try to say where Maharashtra stands. First of all, the point mentioned by Odette was that Israel has got 90 kilometers of pipeline for conveyance of this treated wastewater. 90 kilometers, huge expenditure has been done. I do not think that in India, anybody is prepared to spend money for 90 kilometers of pipeline. Leave the state, even the central government has not made up its mind to invest hugely in the use of treated wastewater. So I wish Avinash Mishra was here from the Niti Aayog. Had he been there, he would have noted that this item of use of treated wastewater needs more importance at Government of India level, more focus and more priority. Jeremy mentioned about priority. Yes, priority is an issue in India. Priority is, it's a developing country. It's not a fully developed country. And therefore, in a developing country, a lot of priorities compete. Unlike in a developed country, where the things to be attended to are very, very, very it's only maintenance of infrastructure. Maybe in some areas, building up infrastructure is an issue. But in a developing country, where every part of the country has to be developed, these issues like use of treated wastewater, etc., they take a lower priority. And Amit Astik is a very enthusiastic officer. That is why he has raised the priority. And whenever I talk to people in different fora, I keep saying that municipal commissioner has got so much of job in his hand that every week his priority changes. And his priority is dependent on what people in that city want and what the people's representative want. And therefore, municipal commissioner is not in total control of all his jobs. Even then, a young officer like Astik, he has given top priority to this subject, at least the top bracket he has given. If not the topmost, he has considered it as a very top bracket item, and that is why immediately he has given the sanction of 2 MLD. he seems to be very much enthusiastic about making money out of it, and I will support him. Yes, why should it go waste? You must make some money out of it, even if it is not able to give you complete return on infrastructure investment. You should be able to make some money out of it, and also stop the rivers and other streams from getting polluted. And in return, you are getting the thanks of the farmers because they are getting good water. So that is a very, very important thing. What we learned from ODED was huge infrastructure investment has to be made by the state governments, by the central government, by the municipal corporations, maybe the industrial development corporations. They have to make huge infrastructure. This is one. Second is that farmer is sure to get some water. He made a very pertinent point, especially when the rains are very, very haphazard and they are dependent on climate, and climate is making the complete rain system erratic. In such a situation, whatever little water can go to the farmer in an assured manner is going to be welcomed by him. And therefore surety, this is what he said, that surety of water is there. And in a place like Israel, where itself the water availability was so less, they have exceeded their water requirement, and they are now exporting to other countries. Even their countries which have not had historically good relations with them, even to them on a humanitarian ground, they are going to export water, right? This is a second lesson we must, all Indians, all the participants, we must learn that we should become fully independent, and we should be able to use treated water to a greater extent. These 2 points I'll pick out from presentation of ODED. There are many points, excellent points. I am sure the participants must have noted. The second very important talk was by Tom Williams, who is the director in the WBCSD. And I was really very happy to see the Wastewater Zero report. And I'm sure Kavita and Anjali, you will circulate the link so that leisurely we can read that and we can learn a lot. Very important points to be noted in the minds of all of us. And the first takeaway from his talk is that in the downstream of a river where polluted water is falling or it is getting mixed, if you go to downstream side, then 1/3 of the GDP you lose. There is a loss of 133% GDP if you go to the downstream side of the polluted river. This is a very important finding. We have to convey this to all our stakeholders. We have to put it in our MWRA website, and all of it. We have to say that if you do not treat water properly, if you pollute your rivers, then downstream of that, you are going to lose 33% of your GDP, which is a great loss to the entire state. The second important point I have picked up from his talk is that 5 things are required. What are the 5 things? Standardization. Standardization of treated water. This is what Mr. Eknath Dawle is also saying. He is the agriculture expert. He is the head of the state in agriculture department. His concern is very much appreciated. He cannot allow is having poisonous elements to go to the farmers and allow the crops and produce to get polluted and get poisonous. His concern is very much appreciated. Therefore, standardization was one point which was mentioned by Mr. Tom. Then regulatory setup, which will look into tariff issues, which will look into discharge issues, which will look into complete cleaning issues, how much of percentage of water you are cleaning, how much of unclean water or untreated water you're leaving to the stream. This is the regulatory part of it. Third he mentioned was value. Are we attaching any value to the treated water or not? This was the third point he mentioned. Then he said partnership. Are you going to go alone, or you are going to partner with the private sector who have access to technology, who have access to finance, and therefore are you going to partner with them, or you are going to go alone? This is the fourth thing he said. And finally he said incentivizing. These 4-5 things are very, very important. Let me now tell you from Maharashtra experience, out of these 5 things, Kavita, you know that very well, and Mr. Tiwari, if he is there, he knows it very well, that out of the 5 things, Maharashtra has been able to address only 3, and that too only partially. 2 have not been attended to at all. Mr. Eknath Dawle, let me tell you, the standardization has not been attended to at all. And therefore, your worry water will also go into crops. It will make the produce poisonous. It will harm health. And therefore, that concern is very true. We have not done it. We have not done it in Maharashtra. And it needs a lot of attention, lot of investment in the FDA and also in the laboratories to come out with standards, right? So in standardization, we have not done anything. What we have done in Maharashtra is partially we have done some regulation. Partially, not fully, not to a satisfactory level, but partially we did some regulation, and WRC, the wastewater reuse certificate, is a part of our regulatory work that we try to do. Second, what we have done in Maharashtra is we try to attach some value to water. I was surprised to know when I made a presentation to the National Water Policy team headed by Dr. Mihir Shah, that many of the states are not charging the farmers at all. They were surprised to see that Maharashtra is charging the farmers, and not only charging the farmers, Maharashtra succeeded in 2018-19 in recovering 100% O&M cost of the Water Resources Department. This was a news to them. Therefore, are all of us in India attaching value to it or not? Or we are thinking that it's abundant, we don't have to take care, it is always available, it is God gifted, you don't have to be asked to be paying for it. I keep saying, jokingly I keep saying that if it is abundant and if it is God gifted, then please take a bucket and stand in the rain and collect your water. Don't expect the government agency to collect it for you, treat it for you, convey it to you, and reach it to your house. I keep saying that, and people laugh at me. Why are you saying this? I said, yes, you take a bigger bucket, you take hundreds of buckets, and stand in the rain and collect your water. Why do you expect the government to spend? Therefore, value of water has to be there. You have to attach value. This is what third thing he said. Then he said partnership. We have not done anything in partnership. This is a second area where Maharashtra has not done anything. We were thinking, but nothing has materialized. And last point he mentioned was incentivizing. Yes, Maharashtra Water Regulatory Authority, I remember that we had incentivized in 2017 that if you use treated water, if the municipal commissioner is willing to sell treated water, then certain formula was given to the municipal commissioner to sell it to industries or to sell it to farmers. Therefore, in summing up of what Tom said, is that out of the 5 very important things which he mentioned, 3 things are partially attended to in Maharashtra. I do not know what has happened in Karnataka or Gujarat, but 2 things have not been attended to at all, and we need to attend to these 2 things. So, Kavita, you can make a request, a note of my request that standardization for use in agriculture and partnership with the private sector. These 2 are very important. Then these 2 picked up from Tom's talk, and then finally coming to Jimmy's talk. He mentioned that establishment of a new fund, which Astik also mentioned, and he's enthused. Astik is enthused that there is a fund and we can tap it. Of course, you can tap it. Of course. In fact, you should keep in touch with the government of India, and you should be able to find out when the policy goes live, when the fund is established, and immediately you should be the first organization to tap that fund and take whatever you like. So this is a good news given by Jeremy, because it has almost taken a final shape, and perhaps in a month or 2 it will come out in the public domain and the policy will be in place. This is one very good news. Second good thing which he said is that the entire policy of the government of India on use of treated wastewater is not totally central. Some part of it is left to the state. Therefore, while uniform for all the states, there will be some areas where different states can have their own innovative approaches. And this is what in the last discussion also it came out when we had the webinar with the NMCG. You were also there, Kavita, and Jeremy was also there from UK. And we did recognize that some freedom is going to be given to the states to have their own innovative methods. Now, coming to the talk of Mr. Shilp Verma, I was really, when I came to know that only 0.8% of the class 2 cities total discharge is getting treated, it's a matter which needs to be attended to, otherwise we'll be too late. And that is where your topic of decentralized water treatment, which you have included for today, there was not much of talk on it, but that is a very, very important thing, because decentralized treatment of wastewater, not only for smaller corporations and municipalities, but also for villages, they are absolutely required. And there are technologies available outside India and in India, which can be brought in for a lower cost. It can be done for a cluster of villages. It can be done for a big village. It can be done for a class 3 or class 2 municipal council, where the investments are not much. It is portable. You can move it from one place to other place. So that is an area which should not be left out. And I think whenever you get an opportunity, please tell the Jal Jeevan Mission. Please tell the Jal Jeevan Mission to integrate this in the Jal Jeevan Mission itself, so that small portable treatment plants are also provided to the villages, to households. Do not get the treatment issues together, then households will be flooded with drinking water, and there'll be no proper treatment of the discharges. Right? That is a very important thing. So that is one thing which Mr. Verma told me, that only 0.8% is getting treated is very, very bad state of affairs. I am a little satisfied on the million+ cities, because they have no option but to attend to it, because otherwise the cities themselves will create problems for the administrators. So they have to attend to it, and they are attending to it, and I'm sure they will surpass their targets very soon. Mr. Vishwanath, most of his talk was concerning the present users of untreated water. And while it gave me a lot of pleasure to know that there is so much of offtake, although untreated, but there is so much of offtake of wastewater, it gave me a lot of happiness. But at the same time, I felt that his concern is not out of place. And if Mr. Vishwanath is hearing, let me tell him that the national policy on treated wastewater has flagged this issue as a very important issue. It has been flagged. What about the present users? What about the present users? They are using untreated water legally, illegally, whatever it is. But what about them? Are we going to displace them? Are we going to make them an opposition team? Are we going to allow them to oppose the entire policy? No. No. My understanding is that the national water policy is already flagging this issue. And in my own suggestion, I had said that initially these people who have invested and these people who are drawing water from the untreated lot, they can be given the treated water free of cost for some time. It's like a tax holiday. When you have an industry in a rural area which is undeveloped, we have a system of giving tax holiday. 5 years you don't pay the tax. When you start earning, when you become strong, then you start paying the tax. Similarly, these people who have to be displaced because of the treatment plant coming, because of the whole system changing, they have to be given some tariff holiday, and they should not be charged at all. If that is done, I do not think there'll be any opposition to the national water policy, right? To sum up, I think I have taken about 30 minutes. To sum up, I would like to inform with humility to all co-participants here and all the international experts. There are 3 good things which are there in India, and there are a number of bad things or negative things which are there in India. First good thing which has come out of today's discussion is there is appetite for treated wastewater. There is appetite for treated wastewater. It is clear from Karnataka example. It is clear from Zalta example. It is clear from Surat example. It is also clear from the mindset of the national level bureaucrats and politicians that we need to have a policy. So there is an appetite. This is the first point, first good thing. What is the second good thing? Second good thing is that the appetite is growing. Not only the appetite is there, but it is growing. Day by day it is growing. A lot of people are wanting. Reasons could be many. Reasons could be no fresh water. Reasons could be erratic climatic changes, no surety of rainwater. There could be many, but the appetite is growing. The third good thing is that there is a willingness to pay for the treated water. Even for fresh water, there is a willingness to pay. We just heard one farmer from Aurangabad Zalta village and another lady farmer who is the leader. She said, yes, we are willing to pay because we don't have water. What do I do? So they are willing to pay. So if you can assure them good water, standard water, as Mr. Eknath Dawle has said, pure water, pure in the sense, not pure to the level of drinking like Singapore, but at least pure enough to go to the crops. If that is done, then they are willing to pay. This is the third good thing. What are the things which are not present in India, unfortunately? Number one, awareness is very limited. And it is there in patches, some blocks of areas. I'm not saying revenue block, I'm saying blocks of areas. Like Karnataka, one area is knowing about it. In Telangana, somebody is knowing about it. In Surat, municipal commissioner area is knowing about it. So there are patches in India who are aware, but the rest of India is not aware about possibility of use of treated wastewater. So this awareness has to go up, and this is where the wastewater zero report is going to be very, very useful. It has to be publicized very, very widely. Seminars, dedicated seminars and discussion should be held on the report, and the academia as well as experts like Mr. Soumya Mukherjee, who is here, they can attend to it and find out what methods, what technologies can be brought in. That is one. Second thing which is not there in India, unfortunately, is integration of various departments. You know how the bureaucracy in India works. One department is not willing to talk to the other. So unless there is a pressure from top that you two talk, you two please talk, then they talk. If there is no pressure from top, the individual department is not willing to cooperate with the other department. So this integration is lacking in India. Integration of various departments of a government is lacking in India. That has to be strengthened by the leader himself or by the political head. What is the third thing which is not there in India? Local level priority. As I mentioned, that we are a developing country. We have lots of other things for today's fulfillment. We want to fulfill it today only. Food. It could be food. It could be road. It could be conveyance. It could be so many other things. Schooling, education, and therefore, in a developing country, this subject of treated wastewater use automatically falls, and therefore, national level and local level priority has to go up. It can go up by the individual person, or it can go by a strong policy, right? Regulatory setup is the fourth thing which is not there in the entire country. Maharashtra is lucky that there is a regulator, and regulator is about 13-14 years old. Very, very lucky. There are other states who have taken to regulatory setup. Punjab is the latest addition. Meghalaya is going to be the next. They are already working on it. They are going to be having a regulator. So regulatory setup is there. Then what Tom says is going to be achieved very, very easily. And last but not the least is some sort of compulsion to use only treated wastewater is a must. We can't always be goody-goody and talk very good and please the other person. Some sort of compulsion, whether in the form of regulatory order or in the form of financial loss or in the differential pricing. I keep saying differential pricing. What is differential pricing? Jeremy mentioned about no freshwater zone. That is around the STP. If it is a 32 ml DSTP, what area can it irrigate? If that is the area which can be irrigated, then in that area, by act, by rule, by order, by notification, you say this is no freshwater use zone. And therefore, if you insist on fresh water, then you pay 10 times of the normal tariff. And if you take treated water, you pay 1 1/10 of the normal treatment cost. So that artificial differential pricing will force people to go towards treated wastewater use. That is the important thing, which is compulsion. In India, everything does not happen by request or by awareness or by education. It happens also because of some sort of compulsion, of course, to the extent that people can absorb it. If people cannot absorb it, it becomes a sort of opposition, a mutiny of farmers, then it's a different thing. But some sort of compulsion initially for a few years is a must. It must be done. Now, coming to the closing remarks, Mr. Astik, it's my personal advice that you should take your entire team to Karnataka and see how the treated wastewater is getting conveyed to long distance and getting used. You should also visit Surat and find out as to what role the municipal commissioner is playing. You have been very enthusiastic. You have given to MLD. I am sure as the use goes up, you will give more and more, and you will also link the entire city to the sewage treatment plant. That is a personal request. You must get into the game, because you know you are there only for 2 or 3 years. After you leave, this subject will again go down to a lower priority. So if you want to really derive pleasure out of it, then you complete it during your tenure. This is my request to you. And last request come thanks to Mr. Eknath Dowde, who really voiced his concern. It is, normal, customary to talk only good things, but he did point out that there are certain bad things associated with use of treated water, and I will request Anjali, associated with the FDA, with the for a cluster of crops or cluster of villages for one crop. Let us say grapes, a cluster of villages. What kind of water is required? Let us say oranges. What kind of water is required? Let us say pomegranate. What kind of water is required? And then in that cluster, the municipal corporation can treat only to that standard which is required. If that is done, then it is win-win for most of us. I think I have taken a lot of time, and thank you, Dr. Patankar. Thank you, Kavita. Thank you all the participants for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think a sincere thank you to you, Mr. Bakshi, for your solidarity and support, and for helping us connect the dots. So should I say connect the drops, guiding us and showing us the way to work on this complex but very important initiative, and for the most inimitable way in which you summarize various insights and different perspectives, both positive and negative, and bring the jigsaw together. I also just wanted to thank our co-conveners, the Israel Trade Mission, the WBCST, and the Indo-EU Water Mission, GIZ, for your collaboration on this webinar series. Thank you, Pearlini, Audid, Tom, Birgit, Vikrant, Jeremy had to leave a little early, and the entire team from the Israel Trade Mission, WBCST, and the Indo-EU Water Mission. We also thank our panelists, Vishwanath, Shilp, for your very, very insightful discussions, and to the team from the government of Maharashtra, of course, Mr. Dable, Astik, हमको क्या कहें हम, ये तो हमारी कर्म भूमि है, and to the farmers of Zalta village for their patience, perseverance, and continuing to repose their faith in us, and for inspiring us through their resolve to face severe challenges. And last but not the least, we thank our audience. I think this has been, much longer than we envisaged it would, and our partners, of course, for attending the session. We invite you to work with 2030 WRG and the government of Maharashtra to mainstream and institutionalize reuse of treated wastewater and help us in scaling and institutionalizing a circular water economy. Thank you very much once again. We will be convening the second webinar in the series, which is on technologies for wastewater reuse, on the 27th of November. Please do diarize this, and we will be sending out a detailed agenda soon. Thank you, everyone, once again. Stay safe, stay well, take care, and have a good evening. Namaste.
Thank you, Kavita. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Bakshi sir. Thank you, Dole sir.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Birgit. Good night.
Yeah, thanks for everything. Bye.